Great Tribal Chief. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101, Improve Broaching Machine. The meaning of Ishikama is actually very simple. It is to change the slider directly pulled by manpower on this broaching machine to mechanical drive. The slider on the broaching bed is not small. The reason for this is to maintain the stability of the hook knife when pulling it. Therefore, coupled with the strong friction between the hook knife and the inner wall of the barrel and the deceleration mechanism under the broaching machine, this results in a great effort required to pull the slider. The change of Shikshin is to use a deceleration device composed of several wooden wheels to drive the hook knife. The core theory is that the small wheel is driven by manpower, and then the small wheel drives the big wheel in order to achieve the purpose of saving effort. Although this will reduce the speed of rifling, it can save energy greatly. Although Old Wood and Ferguson didn't understand the principle of reducer, they encountered almost the same things in their daily lives, so they will soon be able to figure out what the Guardian Sama is saying. Boss, the method you said is indeed feasible, but there are still some things I don't understand. For example, if this improvement method is adopted, how should the barrel keep rotating during the rifling process? Also, what shape should the hook knife be made into? Besides, accompanied by a series of questions from Lieutenant Ferguson, Ishikama also understood that although they understood the power output principle, they were still far from really coming up with this improved machine tool. Shikshin actually doesn't know how to do this kind of broaching machine. He just saw the working principle of the rifling machine on that video. If you ask him to tell him how to make this improved broaching machine, he's really doing it. Not sure. But it doesn't matter. Whether it's Ferguson or Old Wood, or the bunny mouth and hard bones behind Ferguson's ass, they are all kind of people who are good at researching. Just tell them the principle. In terms of the researching personality of this group of guys, the improved broaching machine should be available soon. Come here. I will draw you a rough figure. Shi Xiong was also unambiguous, and directly called a few people to the broaching table. The sliding table of the broaching machine is very flat, so this sliding table is very good to be used as a drawing board. Hardbone took out a piece of coal ground into a cylindrical shape from his pocket and handed it to Shi Xiong. This was a charcoal pen he specially ground out according to Shi Xiong's statement. No way, the tribe is so poor, there is no charcoal, so coal has to be used instead. As a cultural preservation expert in his previous life, Shi Xiong's painting skills are quite good. Even if he holds a charcoal pen polished with coal, he draws down a few strokes. A simple but well-organized drawing machine. The bed appeared on the slider. This broaching machine looks much more compact than the current manual wooden broaching machine. Several wheels of different sizes are located in the middle of the broaching machine. These wooden wheels are actually similar to the deceleration device at the bottom of this broaching machine, but you still need to experiment many times to calculate the ratio between these wooden wheels, so as to ensure the final distance and speed of the rod movement. Lieutenant Ferguson nodded and said, Boss, Mr. Mu and I already have experience with this kind of power transmission device, and we will do it well. Ishikama nodded, and then continued, Next, I will focus on how to make the hook knife move according to our wishes and the rotation of the barrel. Then Shi Xiong drew another picture on the free part of the slide according to the picture in the video that he had watched. This picture is actually a slotted shell. A small slider is stuck in the middle of the slot. There are two connecting rods under the small slider, but Shikshin drew under one of the connecting rods. In fact, if you want to keep the barrel rotating at a constant speed, this problem is not difficult to solve. Look, if we install such a slotted device on the top of the tie rod screw, well, this is a chute, and a chute can be freely stuck. The sliding slider. The slider is connected to the number 1 connecting rod and the number 2 connecting rod. When the chute is installed, there must be a certain slope, and then the number 1 connecting rod is connected with the longest tie rod screw. Then when the big wooden wheel drives the tie rod screw forward, The number 1 connecting rod will push the chute to move. Because the chute has a slope, when the slider moves, it will drive the number 2 connecting rod up or down vertically. Movement. Ishikama combined the strokes and the drawing, and several people quickly figured out the working principle of this device. The working principle of this thing is not difficult. Even Indians like Old Wood and Rabbit Mouth, who have never received any education, can clearly figure out the working principle of this device. Shi Xiong continued, look, as long as the tie rod screw moves forward and backward, then the number 2 connecting rod can keep moving up and down. So can we install another device under the number 2 connecting rod to control the rotation of the barrel? Shi Xiong's understanding of the video ends here. www.wuxiaspa.com. And further down, he can't remember the video clearly, but at this point, most of the core problems can almost be solved. After all, this thing is a kind of mechanical energy exchange problem. It is nothing more than turning the lateral movement into a longitudinal movement or a circular movement. As long as it is controlled, it is not difficult to solve the problem of the fixed rotation of the barrel when the hook knife is rifled. Sure enough, Lieutenant Ferguson, a generation of firearms genius, has a high talent for this aspect. After listening to Shi Xiong's explanation, he only pondered for a while, then nodded and said, "Boss, we can install a belt under the number 2 connecting rod." The cogging device or another set of small deceleration device is finally connected to the barrel, then the barrel can rotate at a uniform speed, but this still requires a lot of calculations and experiments. After a pause, Lieutenant Ferguson said affirmatively, "Boss, if this broaching machine is improved according to your set of improvements, then I can conclude that the efficiency and accuracy of rifling will be greatly improved. For example, 5 or 6 of us pulled out only 1 barrel this afternoon and one afternoon, but if we use this broaching machine, then at most 2 people can pull out 1 barrel in the middle of the afternoon. I am sure of this!" Haha, what are you still doing? Now that you understand the principle of improvement, please calculate and experiment quickly. We don't lack barrels. You can cast it as you want. We don't need wood. We don't need wood. Carpenters, let's do more. No shortage. So hurry up and experiment. Well, if you can experiment with this improved wooden broaching machine, we can even consider using steel to cast such a broaching machine in the future. Ishikama's words made Ferguson's eyes light up again. Chapter 102. Boring. As Shi Xiong said, there is almost no shortage of materials needed to improve this broaching machine, and a few people are very high-spirited, so they plunged in, almost every day thinking about how to improve broaching. Especially Lieutenant Ferguson, he put more effort into this broaching machine than the new rifle. Hard bones, rabbit mouths, they didn't understand the meaning of this broaching machine, but Ferguson knew it. The standard rifles used by soldiers in the British Empire are a little bit behind the times. Although the British Empire's navy is very powerful, the army's firearms are really behind. Not to mention that compared with the rifles of the rival French, even the rifles used by the Spanish and Germans are a bit behind the standard rifles. As a gun genius, Ferguson does not know the importance of rifling. It is a pity that rifling is really a very difficult task. Although the rifled gun has been around for a long time, it can still only be used as an auxiliary unit. But Ferguson knows very well that the musket will inevitably replace the musket. Whether it is effective range or accuracy, muskets are far incomparable with rifled guns. As long as a simpler and easier way to draw rifling can be found, it is an inevitable trend for rifled guns to replace muskets, just like flintlocks replace matchlocks. Lieutenant Ferguson knows very well that even in Europe, there is no way to easily make a rifled gun. The rifled gun can only be made by hand and cannot be popularized on a large scale. But once the specially developed rifling machine can be successfully developed, then rifling will no longer become a barrier to restrict the expansion of rifled guns. If this improved broaching machine can achieve the expected results, then the rifling of 4 to 5 barrels a day drawn by a worker shouldn't be a big problem. Compared with the research and development of new rifles, the research of this kind of broaching machine is more urgent. Because the new rifle is inseparable from this kind of broaching machine. Therefore, Ferguson plunged into the improvement of this broaching machine without hesitation. Now the tribal people in the tribe have a clear division of labor, and most of the women are reclaiming wasteland and farming. With more than 40 tamed bisons, even women can easily drive wasteland plows or columbine carts. The results of a large number of domestication of bison quickly became apparent. More than 40 bison and 50 to 60 women can open up hundreds of acres of wasteland in a day, and hundreds of hectares of wasteland in a few days. In the end, if the wheat seeds weren't there, these enthusiastic women could open up more wasteland. This speed of opening up wasteland and planting seeds, even a fool can see the effects of tame bison plus advanced farming tools. With so many farmland, needless to say, the harvest next year will definitely increase greatly. More than 6 warriors in the tribe are divided into 6 groups. Every day, their task is to catch bison and hunt prey. However, the continuous capture of the bison let the bison know that it is not easy to mix around the Gaoshu tribe. From time to time, the bison is caught by the two-legged monsters. If it is still in this area, it is estimated that it will be all caught in a short time. So the cows simply started to stay away from the Gaoshu tribe. Even if it is not easy to find food in other places, it is better than being caught and enslaved by those two-legged monsters. Don't look at the cows who can't speak, but they are not fools. As herbivores, they are more sensitive to danger. So now, don't look at the tribe sending out many warriors every day to catch bison, but the daily results are getting less and less. At the near stage, 6 groups of warriors go out to catch bison. Sometimes only 1 bison can be captured a day. Compared with the dejection of the warrior who caught the bison, it was prosperous on the side of Zioyan Mountain, and all the people there were happy smiles on their faces. This kind of smile has not disappeared on the faces of these tribesmen since the Vasicus trading team left. At present, there are almost 200 people who make salt on the side of Zioyan Mountain, except for those who clear wasteland and cultivate land and catch bison. The remaining people in the tribe are almost concentrated in Zioyanshan as long as they can still work this side of Yanshan. The salt-making team with only 100 people last time was just busy for 7 or 8 days, and the salt that was made replaced all the things brought by the Vasicus. This is something that has never happened in the tribe. People used to value salt very much, but now almost every household can get dozens of caddies of salt every day. Who cares about this? But in the eyes of those Vasicus, these table salt is an extremely precious material, and the effect of exchanging this worthless table salt for the things brought by the Vasicus is surprisingly good. The tribesmen who tasted the sweetness came to Zioyanshan spontaneously and began to make salt day and night, because Master Guardian said, the next time those Vasicus come over, they will bring a lot of horses to exchange for the salt. Compared to the ironware that is no longer lacking in the tribe, horses are the favorite thing of the tribe. If the salt made by me can really be exchanged for a horse, www.wuxiaspad.com. Whatever you do in the future, it will be much more convenient. So the people's enthusiasm for salt making is even higher than the flames in the earth blast furnace. It wasn't long before Major Hank and the others left. The journey from the tribe to Jamestown was more than 600 miles. Even Major Hank was a carriage, but it took at least a month to go back and forth. The next time Major Hank's people come here to make a deal, at least a month and a half later, they also need to organize the trading of supplies, especially the precious war horses. Even the children in the tribe, now in groups, either help out at Zioyanshan or go out to mow the grass and feed the cows. So, Shi Xiong suddenly felt like he had nothing to do. The stone bear who was free from trouble wandered around and wanted to talk to Hong Yun, but when he arrived at Hong Yun's residence, she found out that she was not there. Asked an old woman living next to Hong Yun, the old woman said that Kabru had gone to the tribal warehouse for sacrifice. When Shi Xiong found Hong Yun in the large warehouse of the tribe, he found that Hong Yun was counting the remaining seeds in the warehouse with a few women. The women in the tribe are the main force in farming, so the storage and quantity of seeds are almost all controlled by the women leaders in the tribe. Like the lack of wheat seeds this time, Hong Yun's attention has been paid. That's why she came to the tribe warehouse to check the number of seeds stored. The wooden house in the tribal warehouse is smaller than the chamber, but there are 6 such wooden houses, all of which store the most important materials in the tribe. Seeing Hong Yun and the others were clearing the seeds, the aching stone bear wandered around in the wooden house. Soon, he was attracted by a dustpan that was not in the middle of the winter. Chapter 103, Fatal Attraction. This soybean. Shi Xiong grabbed a handful in disbelief, held it in his palm, and muttered as he watched it. Soybeans are also called soybeans, which are a specialty of China. Although the entire American continent is the origin of bean crops such as broad beans, mung beans, peas, and kidney beans, the origin of soybeans is in China. There are many legumes, but soybeans, known as the king of beans, are the most important, have the closest relationship with people's lives, and have the greatest impact on the world. Soybean is an important crop combined with farming, land, and crop rotation. Its importance once surpassed rice and wheat in ancient history. Isn't soybean only brought to the United States by a British sailor Samuel Bowen who was employed by the East India Company in 1765? But it is only in 1764 that Mr. Samuel Bowen is still in England, homeland, right? Shi Xiong scratched his scalp and continued to mumble. As for the process and time when soybeans spread to the world, Shi Xiong still knows better. He clearly remembers that soybeans arrived in North America 1 year later than they are now. At that time, the British sailor named Samuel Bowen brought soybeans across the ocean to North America, and started planting soybeans in Georgia. He originally wanted to use soybeans to brew soy sauce and then sell it back to the UK, but he didn't expect it. These crops were particularly adapted to the climate and soil of North America, and then they took root and sprouted in the North American continent. In addition, European colonists brought a large number of cattle and horses to North America, so this crop's rich in plant protein became the mainstay in North America feed. Later, the United States became the country with the largest soybean production in the world. After seeing the stone bear holding a handful of grain there in a daze, the red cloud over there hurried over and looked at the stone bear curiously. Where did this thing come from? Why does our tribe have this thing? Shi Xiong asked. Hong Yun looked at the soybeans in Shi Xiong's hand, and said after a moment of recollection, "You said this kind of soybeans. It seems that this kind of soybeans was brought by a Vasico trading team more than 10 years ago. Our tribe has grown soybeans for 10 years. It's been many years, but it's not delicious. If you eat too much, you just fart, and the yield is low. It's not a good crop. So it's not too much." Not a good crop, my high priest. This thing is not a good crop like you said. This is one of the best crops that the great sun has given us. Shi Xiong shook his head. Violent heavenly things said with an expression. You said this is the best crop that the supreme sun bestows on us? Hong Yun looked disbelief. I have planted this kind of crop. One land can produce up to 2 bags of grain, which means it will keep enough seeds. This thing can only be fried as a snack, and if you eat too much, you will fart, Hong Yun said with a look of disgust. That's because you don't know the benefit of this thing. Well, forget it. It's useless to explain this to you now. You'll know when I get it done. By the way, how many soybeans do we keep in the warehouse? Hong Yun thought for a while, and shook his head slightly. It's not a lot. Maybe there are more than 10 bags. Most of them are seeds left over this year, and a few bags seem to be left over from last year. People in the tribe don't like to eat this kind of stuff. According to the calculation that 1 acre of soybeans in later generations will need about 5 to 6 caddies of seeds, a bag of 25 caddies and 5 bags are enough to plant more than 20 acres of land. Although soybeans are good crops, their yields are not high. Even if they are placed in later generations, the yield of soybeans per mu in the field is about 400 jin per mu. With the rough sowing method used by the tribe before, it is quite good to be able to harvest 50 caddies of soybeans in one season. But if it is intensively cultivated, without chemical fertilizers, 1 mu of land can yield 200 kilograms. These are all produced this year? Well, These are all produced this year. There seem to be a few more bags over there. I will bring them all for you. Okay, bring them all. I have to pick them first. Leave the good seeds, and I will make you some delicious ones for the rest," Shi Xiong said with a smile. "It's okay if you don't laugh. With soybeans, it means that soy sauce and tofu have a place. It takes a little longer to brew soy sauce, and the season is wrong now. There is no way to brew it, but tofu and soy milk are fine. The only regret is that these bins are really missing, and even Shi Xiong can't bear to start." Hong Yun quickly took all the soybeans in the warehouse. The new and the old ones add up to 11 bags, which is almost 275 caddies. In a previous life, this small 300 caddies is enough for the stone bear to carry 5 or 6 times, but this life is different. The strength of this body is really too great. Pour all the soybeans into 2 big bags, tie the mouth tightly, and then with a slight force, a bag of 100 to several kilograms is easily placed on his shoulder. With more effort, another bag of soybeans was also on his shoulders. Shi Xiong carried 2 bags of soybeans weighing nearly 300 kilograms, and walked out of the warehouse slowly, stunned Hong Yun and the women. Until Shi Xiong carried the soybeans out of the warehouse gate. I'm reading www. You can chew. Only then did the calm women chattering. You deserve to be the guardian. I'm afraid the whole tribe can't find a second one with this strength. No wonder the high priest chose this guy as the guardian. If it is me, I will definitely choose him. Hey, I heard the high priest say that Master Guardian does not seem to have a woman yet. Oh, do you guys like the guardian? Haha. I guess the guardian looks down on you. A few women's buildings soon crooked to the other side of the Atlantic. Don't think that Indian women are not 3 or 8. As long as they are normal women in this world, they are all the same in this matter. Shi Xiong's body and this strength have a fatal attraction to most women. Shi Xiong naturally didn't know the voice of the women behind him. Even if he knew it, he would just laugh it off. Although this body is much more majestic than 99.9% of adult fighters, it is only a 16-year-old body after all. Shi Xiong, who has received decades of education in later generations, always thinks that he is still minor. The most important thing is that since coming to this world, Shi Xiong has not seen a woman who can make him feel tempted. Therefore, Shi Xiong would rather deal with the 5 sisters, and did not want to go to bed with a woman she didn't like. Well, it should be called kunshihide. There is no bedsheet in the tribe. Carrying a small 300 caddies of soybeans back to his wooden house, Shi Xiong began to pick full bins from these soybeans. These full-bodied bins are the seeds to be sown in the coming year. Picking the remaining crooked melons and cracked dates will only be eligible to enter the stomach. Chapter 104, Tofu. What makes Shi Xiong more happy is that the quality of these soybeans is not bad. After a day of picking and picking, Shi Xiong picked out 7 bags of soybeans that could be seeded. Although the remaining unqualified soybeans are only 4 bags of 100 kilograms, it is enough to make tofu. 1 caddy of dried beans can produce at least 3 caddies of tofu even if you make cold tofu. These 100 caddies of dried beans can at least produce 300 caddies of tofu. I don't have to worry about running out of tofu this winter. When I think of the smooth and tender tofu, Ishika's saliva almost flows out. Since I came to this era, except for the first few days, the rest of the time is either doing this or doing that, and there is no room to eat some delicious food. In addition to the staple foods of the Gaoshu tribe, apart from polenta and tortillas, the dishes are basically stewed plus grilled plus salt, which has devastated Shi Xiong's stomach and taste buds. Now finally free up, as an elite of the big food empire, Shi Xiong can no longer bear this kind of boring food. Just do it, don't be vague. So after Shi Xiong sent the selected bean seeds back to the warehouse, he staggered to the house of the best stonemason in the tribe. The best carpenter in the tribe is called Wood, and the best stonemason is called Stone. And Wood and Stone are still brothers. Stone is 2 or 3 years younger than Wood, and both of them are carpenters born in the tribe. It's just that when he was young, Stone was not interested in carpenter work. He liked to do stone work, so he learned from the best stonemason in the tribe, the former Stone, Until the death of Old Stone, Stone took over the name of Old Stone, became the new stone in the tribe. In fact, the inheritance of North American Indians is very simple. A name or a title can often be used for several generations or even more than 10 generations. This is the case of the Kabu sacrifice. The same is true of the wood, and the same is true of the stone. When he came to Shaitu's house, Shaitu was busy making big stone mills with his children and grandsons. Since the salt produced in Zeoyanshan has been exchanged for so many things from Major Hank's trading team, the tribesmen have become crazy about salt production. Stone mills, which are indispensable for salt production, have become a hot commodity, and most of the stone mills are made almost every day. Seeing Shi Xiong walk into the house, the family stood up respectfully. For this guardian, more than 90% of the tribe members are very supportive and respected. Without him, although Shi Xiong has only joined the tribe for more than a month, all the tribesmen who fell from his hands have received huge benefits, and he will naturally receive the support and respect of the tribe. The Old Stone family is no exception. "Dear guardian, please sit down." Old Stone gave his seat respectfully. "Stop sitting." Shi Xiong smiled and waved his hand. "I'm here to trouble you to make me a smaller set of stone mills. I'm going to use it to make something." "Oh, what's the trouble to talk about, Master Guardian? Just say what kind of stone grinding you want. I promise to make it for you as soon as possible." "Okay, then I'm not welcome. I want to make such a big stone mill." Shi Xiong said the size of the stone mill he wanted, and the Old Stone nodded repeatedly. The stone mill used by Ishikama is almost the same as the large stone mill used for salt production, but the size is much smaller. The diameter of the upper fan of the stone mill is only about 40 centimeters. After adding the wooden handle, one person can grind it. The soybeans picked out by the stone bear himself are not too many, and even if he makes tofu, he didn't think about making too many at one time, so using this small hand-pushing stone grinder is enough. When Shi Xiong was in his hometown, he watched his grandmother and his mother make tofu when he was a child, and he also did a lot of help. Later, after attending middle school, once the family made tofu, Shi Xiong became the main force. Before going to university, Shi Xiong lived in his hometown in the country. At that time, there was no soy milk machine. To make tofu, the most primitive stone mill was used. The stone mill in S hometown is also a small hand-push stone mill. The upper fan is a round grinding disc with holes in the side wall, and wooden handles can be added. The lower fan is fixed, and there is a large circle on the edge, and there is a material outlet. With this kind of stone mill, I want to make more than 10 kilograms of tofu. Grinding soybeans is very fast. Of course, if you want to make such a stone mill, you can't make it in a short while. It was not until the next afternoon that Old Stone took his 2 sons and used a cart to pull the stone grinder that Stone Bear wanted. With a stone mill, you can start making tofu. In fact, making tofu is very simple. Put the beans in a pot or a wooden basin and add 2 to 3 times the amount of water before going to bed at night. When you wake up the next morning, the beans are basically soaked. Then pick out the few beans that are not soaked, and the remaining soaked beans can be polished with water. The stone grinder is not big, not to mention Shi Xiong's current physique. Even in his previous life, he could easily push such a large stone grinder in circles. The beans leaked from the grinding eye, and while adding water, the stone grinder was rotated. Soon, milky soy milk flowed out from underneath. However, this soy milk contains a lot of impurities such as bean skins. www.wuxiaspot.com. So at the exit of the lower fan, Shi Xiong has already wrapped cotton cloth. The cotton cloth bought from Wasik Human. This cotton cloth is specially used for filtering. The soy milk containing impurities flowing out of the outlet passes through this cotton cloth. The clean soy milk can easily leak down, and the impurities contained in the soy milk are filtered out by this cotton cloth. Under the cotton cloth is a big pottery pot. Yes, don't look at the Gaoshu tribe being very backward, but they knew how to make pottery a long time ago. There are also a lot of pottery in the tribe. The big pottery basin used by Shi Xiong now was brought from Hong Yun's house. Seeing that this pottery basin was almost half received, Shi Xiong's door was pushed open, and Hong Yun walked in with a few women chattering. "What kind of bins are you doing?" Hong Yun squatted next to the stone mill and asked as she watched the stone bear pick up the soy milk. Several women next to each other also whispered, "It's tofu. It's a delicious food, but it will take a while to make it," Shi Xiong said, sweeping out the ground residue with a cooking broom, and then removed the cotton cloth for filtering. "I picked it off and squeezed it so hard that the bin dregs wrapped in cotton cloth was handed to Hong Yun. Don't throw away this thing. Go back and add some chopped potatoes and pumpkin. You can also add some minced meat and add some salt, and then spread it in a pan with oil and fry it on both sides. The taste is very good." Hong Yun took the bin dregs in a daze, hesitated for a moment and asked, "This is what tofu you are talking about?" "Haha, the tofu has to wait a while. This is tofu residue, but it tastes great when it is cooked," said. Shi Xiong began to busy with the next step. P.S. Bo to thank you for the reward of morning Wu Huaxi at 200. Chapter 105, Crooked, Demon Spirit. As Shi Xiong said, tofu residue is actually a very delicious delicacy. The most important thing is that tofu residue is also rich in a lot of plant protein, which can be very effective to supplement the plant protein in the body after eating it. Protein is very important to the human body. To put it bluntly, protein is an essential nutrient if people want to grow strong and powerful. In this era, whether it is the old world or the new world, animal protein will never be enough for humans before the large-scale development of animal husbandry. This is also the main reason why in this era, people all over the world are far less strong than people in later generations. However, animal protein is not enough, so plant protein can be used instead. Soybeans rich in plant protein have become another important way for humans to supplement protein. But now, Shi Xiong has no time to give Hong Yun how to pick up the bin dregs. Compared with soybean dregs, whether it is soybean milk or tofu, it is undoubtedly more delicious, and contains more nutrients. Shi Xiong poured the filtered soy milk into an iron pan, and then started to boil the soy milk. Boiled soy milk is an essential step in the process of making tofu. Everyone knows that eating too much soybeans is prone to bloating and gasping. This is because soybeans contain some harmful substances, such as trypsin, saponins, etc., and people are prone to bloating and indigestion after eating, which restricts soybeans as a staple food. Development of the step of boiling soy milk is to effectively remove the harmful substances contained in soybeans. So it takes longer to boil soy milk, so that high temperature can destroy those harmful substances, so as to achieve the purpose of eliminating those harmful substances. And through high temperature, the protein in the soy milk will be thermally denatured to prepare for the preparation of the milk. As soon as the pot is opened, the soy milk starts to boil. At this time, Shi Xiong starts to reduce the fire volume and control the temperature of the soy milk. When cooking soy milk, control the heat. If the heat is not well controlled, the protein in the soy milk will be destroyed, because the harmful substances contained in soy milk, such as saponin, will be completely destroyed at 92 degrees. But if the temperature of soy milk exceeds 100 degrees, the protein will also be destroyed. Therefore, it is very necessary to control the heat. The small fire licked the bottom of the wok, so that the soy milk in the wok remained in a state that seemed to be unable to open. At the same time, the soy milk would also produce foam. When the foam was about to overflow the edge of the pan, the stone bear put out the fire in the stove. The next step is to wait for the soy milk to cool down a bit, and then start to make some milk. The so-called milk is the process of adding a coagulant to the soy milk at about 80 degrees, and finally let the soy milk coagulate. There is an old Chinese saying that explains the process of making the pulp very well. Bittern tofu, one thing loses one thing. This old saying is actually based on the steps of making tofu. If you want liquid soy milk to solidify, you must add a coagulant. This kind of coagulant used brine or gypsum in ancient China. There is no gypsum stone bear here, but there is brine. Yesterday, when the stone was being milled, the stone bear first made the old wood a wooden box, and then went to the oil shan, where there will be a lot of brine during the salt making. Just scoop back a jar, enough for some tofu. Assuming that the temperature of the soy milk is almost the same, Shi Xiong started to stir the soy milk in one direction with a wooden stick while adding brine to the soy milk little by little. Hong Yun, including several women, watched the stone bear's operation intently. They knew very well that Master Guardian was teaching them a new kind of food, so they learned each one with extra care. Seeing that as the brine was added to the constantly stirring soy milk little by little, the originally liquid soy milk began to slowly appear some condensed particles the size of sesame seeds. This magical change made several women a little excited. You're optimistic. When this point is reached, the pulping is almost complete. Remember, once such sesame grain-sized condensates begin to appear in the soy milk, you must not add brine, otherwise, the brine will be added. The soy milk in the pot is completely useless. The next step is to cover the pot to keep it warm. This process will take about half an hour. At this time, Indian tribes naturally did not have a unit of time such as hours. The time that Shi Xiong said was almost translated into this meaning. Seeing that the stone bear was covering the wooden pot lid, several women, including Hong Yun, began to chirping. Master Guardian, is this tofu you made delicious? Hee, of course it is delicious. This tofu is not only smooth and delicious, but it can be eaten by both the elderly and children with bad teeth. The most important thing is that it can supplement a lot of nutrients that our body needs. Eating more tofu can make us feel better. The body becomes stronger. When several women heard this, smiles appeared on their faces. A young-looking girl asked shyly, Master Guardian, the High Priest Kabur said that this tofu you make is made with soybeans. Will our people have bloating after eating it? Several women laughed happily. www.wuxiaspot.com. An older woman also said to the little girl, Gray Swallow, if you have anything to say to Master Guardian, don't be so twitchy. Master Guardian promises to tell you all the answers. Another woman also said, yes, Gray Swallow, you are so stubborn. Master Guardian can't look down on you. Be brave. Several women burst into laughter, and the girl didn't squeeze anymore. She looked straight at the stone bear generously. Her bright eyes became watery. Indian women are very tough, and shyness is a rare thing for them. Even if the little girl in front of her was even younger than herself, after a few words were said by those women, she immediately transformed into a sturdy little girl. Shi Xiong then understood why these women came here. This is obviously for pro. It's just that the Indian tribes didn't talk about kissing. Men and women only need to look at each other and live together. Obviously, I was taken by this young little girl. This makes Shi Xiong a little speechless. Aren't you here to learn how to make tofu? How come you want to get married in a blink of an eye? Buddy is still an underage boy. Okay, the buddy is only 16 years old. Okay, you seem to violate the Minor Protection Act by doing so. This group of women is really dangerous and too sturdy, much more difficult to deal with than the wolf-tail group. Sorry, demon spirit, come here. Okay, there are a few particularly sturdy ladies here. They molested me. I can't deal with it alone. At this time, Shi Xiong missed his previous life very much. Huai Smartphone. Chapter 106, We like to eat your tofu. Master Guardian showed a rare shy look, which made several sturdy women even more interested, and even Hong Yun, a lady, joined their army. If it weren't for the tofu that was about to come out of the pot, the various chatter of these girls could hide Shi Xiong's face and leave. Fortunately, when Shi Xiong couldn't wait to open the lid of the pot, the girls shut their mouths. Opened the lid, a strong aroma of bean curd came out, and the ladies, like the stone bear, took a deep breath in intoxication. At this time, the tofu is still hot, but it did not condense into a ball because there is too much water in it. In fact, the tofu in the pot shouldn't be called tofu at this time. It is the most appropriate to call it nail. To turn soybean brains into the final tofu, one last step is needed, and that is forming. Ishikama spreads a clean cotton cloth in the wooden box, which he found old wood to make yesterday. It is a mold specially used to press tofu. Use a wooden scoop to scoop all of the tofu in the pot into the wooden box, and then cover the piece of cotton cloth. Shi Xiong put the wooden board slightly smaller than the wooden box on top of the tofu, and then picked it up. I pressed a few moderately heavy stones that I found yesterday. This is the last step in making tofu. First, you need to make a square wooden box like this, and then spread a larger cotton cloth inside, and then scoop all the soybean brains in the pot into this wooden box and cover it. Put an appropriate amount of weight on it. This is to squeeze out the excess boiling water, so that the soybean brains are densely combined to become tofu with a certain water content, elasticity and toughness. Well, this process also takes almost half hours of time. It takes another half an hour to hear, and the eyes of these girls are bright again, and so is the young girl. Shi Xiong said to Hong Yun very simply, "Look at it first, and I'll go out and do something." As he said, Shi Xiong walked outside, but within 2 steps, a familiar lady stopped him. "Master Guardian, what are you going to do?" "Have a chat with us. Sister Grey Swallow really wants to chat with you." I knew this girl Shi Xiong. When I saw Hong Yun for the first time, this girl was by Hong Yun's side. Shi Xiong remembered that this girl was called Greenstone, and she was a very bold girl. Shi Xiong stopped, looked at Greenstone, and then at the Grey Swallow with a look of expectation next to him, and said helplessly, "Greenstone, I want to stay and talk to you, but this belly is not allowed." Are you hungry, Master Guardian?" "It doesn't matter. Our Sister Grey Swallow is a good cook. Let Sister Grey Swallow cook a pot of porridge for you." Shi Xiong rolled his eyes angrily, and said angrily, "I said Greenstone, I don't allow my stomach to be hungry, but I don't allow my stomach to be peculiar. I want to shit." The girls stayed, then burst into laughter. Ishikama opened the door, and disappeared without a trace, and a series of laughter behind him. His sister, "I was molested by a few young ladies. If it wasn't for Lao Tzu not thinking about doing these things now, I have to let you try Lao Tzu's 8th weapon. Hey young ladies, eat Lao Tzu a stick." "Wow, yeah, let go of the stock in his stomach comfortably." Shi Xiong only felt refreshed. Shi Xiong always thought that this kind of comfort was also very enjoyable before he hadn't tasted the taste of and papa in the past and present life. Of course, Shi Xiong deliberately squatted for a while in order to avoid those sturdy girls. Estimated that the time was almost up, he lifted his pants and walked towards his wooden house. As a result, I opened the door and saw that a few ladies were eating there with relish. This box of tofu that was just pressed was originally supposed to be very flat, but now it has become the surface of the moon, which is uglier than a dog's bite. A few ladies don't need anything. They grab the tofu one by one and eat it, ignoring that the hot tofu is hot. That posture can definitely fight a starving ghost who has been hungry for 3 months. His sister, seeing this scene, Shi Xiong couldn't help but explode with a foul language. The scene before him was too subversive. If those girls' stone bears are forgivable because they don't understand, then the high priest Kabru, who has always been calm and reincarnated, looks like a starving ghost reincarnated from the birth. That's really too much. It's incredible. Hearing Shi Xiong's voice, Hong Yun raised his head, with tofu froth on his cheek, chin, and mouth. But even so, Hong Yun still smiled charmingly at Shi Xiong. "Well, Dolly Xiong, the tofu you made is so delicious." After that, the lady picked up a piece of tofu again, put it in his mouth and ate it with a baby babble. The scene in front of him made Shi Xiong a blood drop in his heart. "I worked so hard to pick beans, soak beans, grind beans, boil soy milk, order tofu, and finally made a box of tofu, but you guys are all ruined." But the rock bear can't say anything to these ladies. The education he received in his previous life allowed Shi Xiong to adhere to the tenet of good men do not fight with women. In this life, there is a nominal boss on top of his head. Kabru sacrifices, and this lady just paid praised myself. What do you think Shi Xiong can do when facing these girls? Can't yell at these girls, and then puff mercilessly. Oh no, let them out mercilessly. But, it doesn't matter if you eat tofu, you have to save some for Lao Tzu, right? What are you doing? Don't you guys know that the pressed tofu needs to be cut up and eaten? It seems that these girls really don't know that this tofu should be cut into pieces. www.wuxiaspot.com. Shi Xiong patted his forehead helplessly, and finally stopped and hurried forward. In 2 steps, With a big swipe, he picked up the wooden box. Fortunately, in the four corners of the box, there are some tofu that has not been destroyed by the claws of these girls. Shi Xiong took away the wooden box, and these ladies don't do it. This is eating incense, why are you taking it away? Hong Yun tilted his head and looked at his guardian, with an unhappy expression on his face. The same is true for the ladies next to him, as if Shi Xiong just gave them snapped. But then again, with the majestic physique of Master Guardian, even if you really had her with you, you should be very happy. Okay, what are you doing with such a bad face? Was stared at by a few pairs of faintly resentful eyes. It was a bit too much for Shi Xiong to be so powerful. What I knew was that I took away the tofu box, but I didn't know what happened to them. Shi Xiong could only cough a few times and said, "You guys, it's wrong to eat tofu like this. Don't you think that eating tofu raw like this is not delicious?" A few ladies shook their heads, and the bold and hot little sister Paper Gray Swallow said, "Master Guardian, this is delicious. Also, the tofu you made is really delicious. We like it. Eat your tofu. We like to eat your tofu. I like to eat your tofu. Eat your tofu." Tofu. Ishikama almost hugged the box with his head. Chapter 107. Surprise. The remaining bit of tofu was ultimately not saved. In front of a group of wolves and tigers, Shi Xiong completely retreated. This is also the first time Shi Xiong has personally experienced the sturdiness of an Indian woman. Cannot be sturdy? Indian women, especially women in North American Indian tribes, are definitely the toughest women in the world in this era. Indian tribes like the Cherokee, Cree, and Chickasaw tribes living in the southeastern part of the North American continent are better, because they have entered a semi-farming civilization, so most of the women in the tribe are usually in the tribe, the crops in the field, child care and housework. But the women of the Indian tribes living in the North and Midwest are extraordinary. They are even warriors in the tribes, whether hunting or fighting other tribes. These sturdy women are really warriors. But even so, the 5 women headed by Hong Yun made Shi Xiong a mess. The main reason is that if this group of women burst out without going through the brain, the lethality is too great. Therefore, Shi Xiong did not keep the tofu left in the box, but he grabbed a piece of tofu, and the taste was no different from the tofu made by himself in his previous life. "Guardian, you can make another box of tofu. Your tofu is so delicious." Ishikama almost threw the tofu box in his hand and turned his head and ran away. Gray Swallow obviously hadn't realized that what he said was too lethal for Shi Xiong. In fact, this kind of remark is not only for Shi Xiong, as long as it is any man who has undergone the baptism of modern life. I am afraid that he can't stand it. Han Yun didn't say anything, but the look of expectation on her face was obvious. Shi Xiong smiled bitterly and shook his head and said, "It's not that I don't want to make it anymore, but that there are not many raw materials for making tofu. If you follow this approach, the remaining raw materials can only be used to make about 30 boxes of tofu at most. But our people have not eaten it yet." Ishikama's words are not an excuse. 1 caddy of soybeans can produce 3 caddies of old tofu. Even soft tofu with a relatively large water content is about 4 caddies at most. In Shi Xiong, there are only 100 kilograms of soybeans that can be used to make tofu, and a maximum of 300 to 400 kilograms of tofu can be made. A single member of the tribe is about 1 kilo. Hearing Shi Xiong's words, the ladies stopped speaking, but obviously, they should all be thinking about planting more soybeans next year. Soybeans used to be unpopular, mainly because they eat too much and have diarrhea and stinky fart. If they don't taste good after they are cooked, it's good to fool children with snacks. It is estimated that this kind of crop has not been planted in the tribe. But when the soybeans were made into tofu, this previously unpopular crop immediately became a sought-after product. But there is only so much left of this stuff, which really became a clever woman is cooking without rice. Han Yun lowered his head for a moment and wanted to ask, "Dolly Zhong, if you change to other beans, can you make this kind of tofu?" Shi Xiong nodded affirmatively. "Some beans can be made tofu, but not all beans can be made tofu. This needs to be screened. Go, follow me to the warehouse. There are a lot of other beans in the warehouse. Hong Yun said very neatly, then turned his head and walked out of the wooden house where the stone bear lives. A few women followed out with a grin. Shi Xiong looked at the house that hadn't been cleaned up yet, shook his head slightly, and walked out. Is still the warehouse of the tribe, but changed the house. When Shi Xiong walked into this wooden house, he saw Hong Yun directing the women to find beans. Shi Xiong was not familiar with this place, so he didn't step forward to help. A few women are very agile, and it didn't take long before Shi Xiong was full of bins of various colors. Adzuki beans, mung beans, lentils, kidney beans. Well, there are 7 or 8 kinds of beans. In fact, the American continent is the origin of many beans, and most of the beans that are popular in the world in later generations are spread from the American continent. Although most of these beans are produced in Central and South America, after all, North America and South America are connected, so many beans originating in Central and South America have spread to the North American continent long ago. It's just that the vast majority of North American Indians do not engage in farming, so most of these beans are grown in a small area. The Cherokee tribe happens to be the North American Indian tribe that grows these beans, so there are so many kinds of beans here. Well, this kind of beans can be made tofu, but the tofu made is green in color, but it tastes very good. Shi Xiong grabbed a handful of mung beans from these beans and said with a smile. Mung beans can be used to make tofu. This is something Ishikama has known for a long time. He has eaten tofu made with mung beans many times in his previous life, but Shi Xiong has not made mung bean tofu himself, but he knows that there is no difference between using mung beans to make tofu and soybeans. Well, this kind of adzuki beans can also be used to make tofu. www.wuxiaspot.com. Shi Xiong put down the mung beans in his hand, grabbed a handful of red beans, and said happily. In his previous life, Ishikama loved to eat tofu. Whether it was soybean tofu, mung bean tofu or adzuki bean tofu, he had eaten it, and the taste was no different. What about the other beans? Hong Yun asked nervously. Shi Xiong shook his head and said, I don't know if other beans can make tofu. The Supreme Sun hasn't instructed me, but I can be sure that mung beans, soybeans and adzuki beans can be made tofu. Sacrifice. Are there many kinds of beans? Hong Yun shook his head regretfully. The output of mung beans and adzuki beans is not high, and they are about the same as soybeans. There are not many mung beans and adzuki beans preserved in the tribe, and they still need to keep seeds. Ishikama nodded slightly. This is okay. This year is less. When we have more varieties next year, then the harvest will be a lot more. If we wait another year, then the beans will be more. Before he finished speaking, Shi Xiong didn't go on. Instead, he looked at one of these beans in a daze with a look of surprise on his face. This is peanuts. Are there peanuts in our tribe? Shi Xiong grabbed the brown-red beans, which were obviously much larger than the various beans, and asked happily. Yes. There are a lot of peanut beans in our tribe. This kind of beans are more delicious, and they don't have diarrhea and fart after eating, so the tribe will plant a lot of them every year, but the yield is not high. Shi Xiong rolled his eyes and didn't make a sound, but he complained in his heart, as far as your planting method is concerned, I am afraid that except for sweet potatoes, pumpkins and potatoes, the yield of what you grow is not high. P.S. I'm going out early today. And these 2 chapters were sent out earlier. Chapter 108, Peanut. No matter how you complain, it is truly a good thing to find peanuts. Although the beans are also very good, they can make porridge, can make tofu, can make soy milk, can supplement protein, but where are the peanuts enjoyable? Peanuts can be eaten raw, fried, cooked, or porridge. The most important thing is that with peanuts, you can squeeze the oil, and with the oil, the tofu made from beans can change in the future. Eat it in a tricky way. Braised tofu, spicy tofu, stewed tofu, there are also potato roast beef, stewed beef, grilled beef strips, chili beef. When I think of the stir-fries, Ishikama feels that his saliva is increasing rapidly. Great Bear, what do you think? Why don't you talk when I ask you? Hong Yun's dissatisfied voice pulled Shi Xiong out of the wonderful food fantasy. Turning around, Hong Yun was staring at herself unhappy. Oh, I was thinking about something just now. If you have any questions, you can say it again. Hong Yun stared at Shi Xiong dissatisfiedly and then said, I just asked you, can these peanuts also make tofu? Peanut tofu? Of course. This peanut can of course be made tofu, and the tofu made from peanuts tastes better. Well, besides making tofu, the most important thing is to squeeze oil. This is peanuts. The greatest use. Oil extraction? What is oil extraction? Can it be eaten? Hong Yun asked in a puzzled manner, and the women next to her also had a pleased informed expression on their faces. Cough cough ... You can't eat the squeezed oil. Oh. Before Shi Xiong's voice had finished, the ladies said along in unison, and their tone was full of disappointment. Well, what? Although you can't eat this oil, the oil is necessary to make a lot of delicious food. To put it bluntly, oil extraction is only a method or a process, and the extracted oil is the key. The squeezed oil, is it delicious? The ladies asked again in unison. My God! How come I met such a bunch of hungry ghosts and reborn girls? Shi Xiong slapped his forehead helplessly and muttered in Chinese in a low voice. He was completely defeated. You can't eat the squeezed oil, but this oil is specially used for cooking. The cooked dishes are delicious. Forget it. Now I'll explain to you that you don't understand it. I'll use it later. You know what the peanuts are used for when the oil is squeezed out. Then wait for you to use the squeezed oil to make delicious dishes. We will eat again. The ladies said in unison again, turning around one by one after speaking. Oh ... Don't go. How many peanuts are there? Where are they? Hong Yun turned his head and smiled at Shi Xiong and said, Dolly Xiong, you can find it by yourself. There are a lot of peanuts in this room. You can leave the seeds, and you can call the rest. Finished. The lady also walked out of the wooden house. Damn, eat and wipe and leave. Shi Xiong muttered helplessly again. But I heard Hong Yun said that there are a lot of peanuts, which is indeed good news. Shi Xiong searched this wooden house and found a lot of peanuts. Some of these peanuts are peeled, some are peeled, and some are already moldy. But in general, the quantity is a lot. There are hundreds of bags. It can be seen that peanuts are still very popular in the tribe, otherwise it would be impossible to keep so many peanuts in the warehouse. Where is the origin of peanuts? It's still hard to say. Some said the country of origin was Brazil, some said it was Egypt, and some said it was in China. Before the 16th century, China basically did not have a peanut crop. However, archaeologists discovered carbonized peanut seeds in China twice. This evidence shows that peanuts existed in China as early as the Neolithic. I know why this crop once disappeared in China, and it was introduced to China by Europeans in the 16th century. Anyway, no matter where peanuts are originally produced, Central and South America started planting peanuts a long time ago. There is no doubt about this. And because of geographical reasons, there are also some Indian tribes in North America that have started planting peanuts long before Columbus discovered the New World. This is also an indisputable fact. Not to mention other tribes, the Gaoshu tribe alone has a history of planting peanuts for hundreds of years. This history is much longer than the history of the tribe planting soybeans. And the peanut stuff is really delicious, even if it is eaten raw. It is a very good food. So it is not surprising that there are so many peanuts in the tribe. There are only 100 bags of peanuts, but in fact it is less than 3,000 kgs. Everyone in the tribe still weighs less than 10 kgs. This quantity is not much, really not much, so it must be used together to reflect the value of peanuts. Although peanuts are delicious, they are better for squeezing oil. Peanuts are among the top crops in terms of oil yield. Especially peanut kernels after peeling. The oil yield is second only to sesame seeds. However, the yield of sesame is far lower than that of peanuts, so peanuts are the best crop for oil extraction. Of course www.wuxiaspa.com compared with soybean oil squeezed from soybeans. Although peanut oil is far inferior to soybean oil in quantity, it tastes stronger than soybean oil. In China, peanut oil is a high-end oil, while soybean oil can only be regarded as a medium to low-grade oil. There are peanuts in the tribe, so who still squeezes oil from soybeans? These 3,000 caddies of peanuts are deducted from the seeds, and then peeled off. There will be about 2,000 caddies left at most. However, the oil output rate of peanuts is as high as 40%, even if there is no modern oil press of later generations. Even if the most primitive methods are used to extract oil, the oil output rate will not be less than 30%. 2,000 caddies of peanut kernels can produce at least 600 caddies of peanut oil. If you can really squeeze 600 caddies of peanut oil, save a little bit and eat enough for the tribe for a few months. Looking at the peanuts that were found, Shi Xiong's mind couldn't help but toss up a lot of stir-fried vegetables. Unknowingly, a gleam of crystal appeared on the corner of this big head's mouth. Put out his tongue and licked the corner of his mouth fiercely. Shi Xiong decided to start the preparations for oil extraction immediately. In later generations, oil extraction is all mechanized oil extraction, and various oil presses emerge unconsciously, and oil extraction is also a very easy task. But here, in this North American Indian tribe with nothing, to squeeze these peanuts out of fragrant peanut oil, a lot of preparation work is needed, and the complexity is no worse than steel making. But no matter how complicated it is, I have to do it. As a glutton of a big food empire, how could Shi Xiong let go of peanut oil? There are many iron pots in the tribe now, and even the frying ladle is easy to make. So, as long as peanut oil is squeezed out, can those delicious dishes be far away? P.S. The new week begins again. Lao Mo kneels for recommendations and collections. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109. Double lift saw. Huh? Such a thick piece of wood? It's really a bit difficult. Facing the strange request made by Master Guardian, Old Wood was also frowning. It would be nice if the Guardian wants a thinner piece of wood, but his mouth is a thick piece of wood that 3 people hold together. This requirement is not to mention Old Wood. Even the entire Gaoshu tribe is very difficult. What? Isn't it difficult? Shi Xiong asked. It's not a question of difficulty, but the key is the time you asked for. Lao Muta said helplessly. If the Guardian doesn't ask for time, then it's not difficult to deal with a big tree slowly. It will take 2 or 3 days to slowly chop it down. Back then, when the tribe made a wooden boat for crossing the river, it was used. This is a way to slowly bring down a tree with a big tree. This is not nonsense. In the past, there were no iron tools in the tribe. Tree felling was done with stone axes. More than a dozen people took turns to work. It would take at least 2 or 3 days to chop down such a thick tree. But Master Guardian wants such a thick tree in 1 day. The difficulty is not ordinary. Is the tool not handed in? Seeing the awkward color on Old Wood's face, Shi Xiong knew where the problem was. The 3 people hug a thick tree, which is almost 1.5 meters in diameter at breast height, without a large seesaw for 2 people. It is not easy to cut down such a big tree in 1 day. At the very least, use an axe. I'm afraid it is really impossible to complete this job. Don't think it's easy to cut a tree with a breast diameter of 20 or 30 centimeters with an axe, but if you cut such a thick tree, it's no less difficult than a person pulling a curved plow to continuously plow dozens of acres of land. If you want to use an axe to pour down such a thick tree, you may not even be able to cut half of it. This axe will have to roll its blade. The Old Wood took a sigh of relief and nodded quickly. Yes, Master Guardian, without the right tools, we can only use an axe to grind a tree like this. If you want to cut down such a thick tree, it will take at least 2 or 3 days to chop down with an axe. After the tree is felled, and then cut off the extra branches, it will take at least another day or 2. 1 day. We won't be able to finish this job in the same time. Shi Xiong nodded, then thought for a while and said, "You all follow. I am going to make you a large seesaw. With this thing, the big tree held by the 3 can be felled in 2 hours. Large saw? Is it the same big saw as the manual saw?" It's not the same. This kind of saw is much larger, and it requires 2 people to use it. It is specially used to deal with thick trees or thick wood. With this thing, it will be much easier to cut trees in the future. Go to the wood planer, I need his help. Old Wood turned his head and shouted at a granddaughter. The little girl ran out and called her uncle. When the stone bear brought the old wood to the open space in the center of the tribe, it happened to catch up with Lieutenant Ferguson with the hard bones. They were melting a pot of molten iron in a kale and clay cauldron, and they wanted to build a new barrel for experimentation. It's better to rush early than to rush by coincidence, so the stone bear slapped his palm, and the pot of molten iron that had just been ignited for smelting became stone bears. Lieutenant Ferguson was very dissatisfied. Is there any way to be dissatisfied? It's shameless to catch up with the boss. He can only endure it as a little brother. It will take a long time to melt this pot of molten iron, and this time is just right for Shi Xiong to make a mold. If you want to make a double-handed woodworking saw, it is obviously impossible to knock it out with a hammer. The best way is to cast. Anyway, this double-lift saw has not so fine requirements for the saw teeth. The casting method is most suitable for this kind of saw. The 2 sons of the wood planer and the cross saw brought their sons bow drill and chisel and quickly rushed over. They were busy making salt in Zio and Shan. With so many new forces joining, the mold was quickly made. This is a long iron sheet mold with a length of 2.5 meters, a width of more than 30 centimeters, and a thickness of about half a centimeter. One side of the iron sheet is straight, and the other side has serrations nearly 3 centimeters long. After the mold is finished, it will be calcined. Anyway, it is too late to dry in the shade, so I just burn it directly. After the pot of molten iron over there melted, the mold on this side was almost baked, and the wooden planer took the iron scoop and poured the molten iron into the mold. Because the mold is very thin, it cools quickly. After more than an hour, the 2.5 meter long double lift saw was freshly baked. Because it uses medium carbon steel, the toughness of the saw is quite good. However, the big saw is far from complete to achieve this level. There are 2 most tedious tasks. One is to quench the teeth to increase the hardness of the teeth, the other is to sharpen the teeth. These 2 tasks are very cumbersome, especially the sharpening of saw tooth. In the current situation of no electric grinder, the only way to sharpen the blade is manual. Ferguson had seen this kind of big saw. He thought that the boss came over in a hurry and grabbed his own pot of molten iron to do something important. I'm reading www.ukenshu.com turned out to make such a big saw. Ken only helplessly shook his head to indicate that the boss is unreasonable. Ishikama had no intention of comforting Lieutenant Ferguson. He just wanted to quickly get the big saw out, and then cut down a big tree thick enough to make an old-fashioned wedge oil press. Hardening the teeth of the big saw is also quite troublesome. After all, this big saw is too long and the quenching part is limited to the teeth, so this job is not only troublesome, but also difficult. But it's hard to stop Shi Xiong, although Shi Xiong has never done this kind of work, but he still has wood planing them beside him. There are 3 heads and one's huge liang. There are several people around Shi Xiong, and there is also a second Lieutenant Ferguson. After a little total, a plan for quenching the sawtooth comes out. For this reason, the stone bear once again occupied a stove, but it was sealed with kaolin, leaving only a gap of about 5 centimeters wide. After the stove was ignited, the wind box was used to blow inward, so that the flame would pass through it. A gap emerged. Put the sawtooth part of this big saw in the gap, and quench it after the flame burns the sawtooth red. Although this work can only be done one step at a time because the stove is small, the 2.5 meter long saw teeth can all be quenched by doing a few more times. For this reason, Lieutenant Ferguson also had to temporarily put aside his work and help the boss with the big saw. A few people were busy working all afternoon, and this saw with hardened serrations was completely completed. As for the cutting edge, although it is very cumbersome, it is not a big deal for Lao Muzuo and his family. This kind of meticulous work can be done by Lao Muzi, his 2 sons or his 2 grandsons. If you play 5 together, you can finish this saw in one night. Chapter 110, Big Saw and number 039:S prestige. Early the next morning when Shi Xiong led Miu Miu and his family to cut trees in the southern woods, a large group of people followed to watch the excitement. It's too boring to implement the Indian tribe in winter. The Gaoshu tribe is still good. After all, the work of salt production involves the energy of the tribe. If it is in other tribes, in the moon of the November, and the moon of the long night, December, during the handover period, I basically spent all day in my tent or wooden house. Even if the Gaoshu tribe has salt production work, people will always be a little slack after working for a long time. Especially the cross saw and the wooden planer carry such a big saw, which is even rarer for the tribe. After a little inquiries, I knew that this big saw was made by the guardian, in order to cut down a big tree that was at least 3 people hug. Cutting such a thick tree is rare in the tribe, just like all the tribesmen in the Gaoshu tribe today, except for a few old people who have seen cutting such a thick tree. Most of the other tribes have never seen it cut such a thick tree. The canoes made of thick tree trunks in the tribe have been around for decades, and are older than most people in the tribe. Originally, Lord Guardian was the focal figure in the tribe, but now Lord Guardian suddenly came up with such a thing. Who would go to make salt? It doesn't matter if the salt production is delayed for a day, but if you miss the Guardian Sama cutting the tree, it would be a pity. Therefore, more and more clansmen followed, and even the soldiers who were going to go out to catch the bison did not want to go out. Lile simply ordered the whole clan to take a day off today. So, the mighty crowd followed the stone bear and the wood family to the woods to the south. This is a large oak forest. You can see thick oak trees everywhere. There are many big trees that are 2 people, 3 people and even 4 people. These big trees have lived here quietly for hundreds or even thousands of years. The ghost knows that today the big tree will become the hapless ghost. The wood of the oak tree is very hard, and almost all of the new carts in the tribe are made of oak. However, oaks generally cannot produce long boards, because the branches of oak trees are relatively short, and some oak trees have several large branches even 2 or 3 meters above the ground. The stone bear needs a straight trunk that is at least 3 meters in length, so a few people searched in the woods for a while before they found a large tree that met the requirements. This big tree must be at least 300 or 400 years old, and its huge canopy covers a large area. If this is in the later generations, this big tree is definitely a protective tree, but now, in this place, this big tree can only be regarded as medium. The first branch of this big tree grows about 4 meters above the ground, with a diameter at breast height of about 1.4 meters. The most important thing is that the trunk of this oak tree is not as curved and uneven as other oak trees. The trunk is relatively straight. So Shi Xiong matched this unlucky one at a glance. In fact, if the stone bear is really reluctant to cut down a world lord, then just find a giant North American sequoia to meet the requirements of the stone bear. After all, in terms of the straightness of the trunk and the height of the forks, it is estimated that there is no tree species in this world that can match these world masters. Just like the world masters next to the tribe, each of them is 60 to 70 meters high, and the positions of the tree crowns are often more than 40 meters. Which means that the length of the trunks of these world masters exceeds 40 meters. Coupled with the terrifying breast size and excellent texture of these world masters, no wonder this kind of tree was almost cut to extinction in later generations. However, stone bears from later generations are really rare. These North American giant cedars, he is really reluctant to chop down any world master, so one of these world masters escaped by luck. Seeing the Mu family walking towards the oak tree under the leadership of the guardian, the people immediately started talking. The turbulent discussion made Shi Xiong a little helpless, mainly because the people of the tribe thought it was too time-consuming and laborious to cut down such a tree, so almost no one was optimistic about the wooden family. Since you don't believe that Lao Tzu can kill this tree in a short period of time, please keep your eyes open and watch it carefully, and see what power Lao Tzu's double-handed saw is really powerful. Old Wood's little grandson Chisel is 18 years old this year, the father of 2 children, but this guy is also a very good warrior, very flexible, so he left the rope tied to the canopy. This great guy swiftly climbed up the rough bark like a monkey, and in a short while, he climbed to a height of more than 20 meters. Although the oak tree has a lot of branches, and there is basically no main trunk from the main branch to the top, even the branch is extremely strong. Is like the branch that a chisel is climbing. Although it is only a branch, it is 70 or 80 centimeters in diameter. The most important thing is that this tree branch is slanted like a stretch from the southeast. If you tie a rope to this tree branch, then relying on the weight of this tree branch and the people who pull the rope below, you won't worry. This big oak tree does not fall to the southeast. The brown rope with a length of tens of meters and the thickness of a child's arm was quickly tied up. More than 20 strong soldiers stood at the southeast of this big oak tree and grabbed the rope. Once the tree was cut down, almost www.wuxiaspa.com, they will pull the rope. Obviously, these soldiers are not nervous at all. After all, it seems to them that although the two sons of old wood are carrying such a strange thing, they may not be able to chop down this big tree today. Inverted. Shi Xiong saw that the preparations were done, so he nodded to the cross saw and the planer. The two guys immediately grabbed one of the handles of the double-handed saw and stood to the northwest of the oak tree. The two of them will saw from this position, and eventually the trunk of the whole tree will be sawn off. The two brothers had already practiced how to pull the big saw last night after they finished cutting the big saw. The two people spit on the palms of their hands, and with the help of the old wood, they stuck the big saw firmly on the trunk. Then two people started chanting 1, 2, 1, 2. Accompanied by the sound of the trumpets, the two started to pull the saw in a tacit understanding. At the beginning, the big saw did not pull too much, and the horizontal movement distance was only a few tens of centimeters, so as not to run the saw. But as the sawdust continued to fall, the saw teeth of the big saw began to slowly penetrate into the trunk of the big tree, and the moving distance of the big saw began to slowly increase, and more sawdust followed the continuous movement of the saw teeth, fell down. Within a short while, a half of the saw body with a width of about 30 centimeters was submerged in the trunk. This kind of double-lift saw is specially designed to deal with big trees. Before the appearance of chainsaw, no tool can be more efficient than this kind of double-lift saw to cut trees. The clansmen on the side were all dumbfounded. Where have they ever seen such a rapid cutting of trees? P.S. Bo to thank book friends 2018013023250567 inches 100 for the reward. Chapter 111. New problem. Pull the big saw, pull the big saw. Grandmas watch the big show. Shi Xiong stood not far from the Hangzhou and Macau brothers, humming softly the children's rhymes sung to him by his grandparents when he was a child. The double-handed saw is a weapon specially designed to deal with large trees, just like the plowing of the sloping plow is used for plowing, and the chariot is used for planting. Before the more powerful chainsaw appeared, the best tool to deal with such thick trees was undoubtedly this double-handed big saw. However, it is not easy to play with this kind of big saw. The two people who pull the big saw must cooperate tacitly, and the force used should be in a straight line and a horizontal plane as much as possible, otherwise it will be easy to appear. The situation of the clamp saw. The so-called clamp saw refers to the uneven use of force during the movement of the saw blade, which causes the saw blade to deviate from the sawing plane, thereby being clamped by the wood. Clip saw is the most taboo thing for woodworkers when sawing wood. Because seesaw is a job that pays great attention to rhythm, a person's seesaw is good or not. Just look at his rhythm. Saw clamping is the #1 crime that destroys the sense of rhythm. Once the saw blade is clamped and the rhythm of the seesaw is destroyed, the most important thing is that if two people are exerting force at the moment of clamping, it is very likely to be the saw blade was broken. Don't look at the thickness of this big saw is close to 5 millimeters. But don't forget that this is a 2.5 meters long saw with extremely long arms. Both the cross saw and the wood planer are both strong. For adult men, once the saw is clamped when they are pulling the saw, their strength is added to the position of the clamped saw through the action of the long arm of force. Then it is very likely that the big saw will be broken. However, These two brothers deserve to be brothers. Although this is the first time to cut a tree with a real sword and a gun, both of them bear in mind the key to seesaw that Master Guardian has told me so early in the morning. Plus both of them are more careful. Even if the pulling distance is increased, they still exert their force as evenly as possible. In order to prevent the saw pinch, their sawing speed will naturally not be fast. After pulling for more than 10 minutes, the trunk of the entire tree could be sawed by a fifth. When pulling a large saw, it is best to pull at the beginning, because the saw blade has not yet contacted the sawnwood surface, so the friction is not very large. However, as the saw teeth continue to deepen, the contact area between the saw blade and the wood surface becomes larger and the friction force will become larger and larger, which will increase the load of the saw. Sure enough, only after pulling it for more than 10 minutes, the brothers gradually stopped pulling, and the arms of the two of them were sore that they could not lift up. Pulling a big saw is definitely a kind of heavy physical work. Don't look at the two people pulling and pulling, it seems to be very easy, but in fact, the force used is very large. Otherwise how could it be possible to saw such a big tree? The two brothers Hangzhou and Musha are strong, but they can't stand it after only 10 minutes. But it doesn't matter if they can't stand it, their sons immediately took over their father's class. The bow drill and chisel held the handles on both ends of the saw, and then began to shout rhythmic chants, and began to continue pulling the saw. The two brothers are obviously not as proficient in drawing a saw as their Lao Tzu, but this thing is familiar. At first, the little brothers were a little cautious, for fear of breaking the saw, but as the saw teeth continued to deepen, the little brothers gradually learned the trick of pulling the saw, and the rhythm of the saw gradually became smoother. Stand up. So, under the stunned gaze of a large group of people, Miu Miu's two sons and two grandsons took turns in battle. It took less than 2 hours. The big tree shouted in unison among the 20 soldiers. Zishan and vigorously pulled down and fell to the ground. A bunch of people are just like seeing a ghost. Even the soldiers who just pulled down this big oak tree are a bit unbelievable. Before using a stone axe to chop such a big tree, more than a dozen people would take turns to work at least 2 or 3 days to cut down, but now only 4 people take turns to pull that big piece of iron. It is so short. This big tree was destroyed within a short period of time, which is really subverting the cognition of these people. Old Wood happily stroked the double lift saw, even if the saw blade was still hot at this time, but Old Wood could take care of this. In fact, even Old Wood didn't believe that this big saw could be so powerful. He has a cross saw which is regarded as a treasure. His eldest son is named after that saw, which shows the Old Wood's love for saws. But even so, he never thought that this big saw could cut down this big tree so cleanly. This is no ordinary wood or plank, it is a big tree with 3 people hugging each other. With such a powerful saw, can the Old Wood be ecstatic? Shi Xiong looked at the look of Old Wood. It is estimated that this old guy might have to name his great-grandson or great-granddaughter who is about to be born. Saw www.wuxiaspot.com. Think about a newborn little baby, called Big Saw by a group of people, was also a little drunk. After the big oak tree fell to the ground, after a brief period of shock, the people began to get busy. The felling of such a big tree can be regarded as a major event in the tribe. After all, there are too many available parts for such a big tree. Even the thinner branches can make many spears. As for those thick trunks, they can be used to make bows and arrows after being dried. Oak is a good material for bows or arrows. Especially oak is harder and can be used to make hard bows. The range can be longer, and the power of bows and arrows will be greater. Of course, oak is also very good for making wooden bowls and basins. In short, this big tree is felled, and every family in the tribe can benefit from it. So the people of the tribe rushed up, cutting branches, and removing bark. Needless to say, they cooperated very well. Even some little guys will pull some twigs aside. Soon, the big tree was stripped naked, the canopy that could cover hundreds of square meters was gone, and the old bark that represented the vicissitudes of life was gone. And the huge oak tree became like that. The bare trunk is more than 3 meters long. But the things that caused Shi Xiong's headache also followed. The remaining trunk has a diameter at breast height of 1.4 meters and a length of almost 3.5 meters, which meets the requirements of the stone bear. The problem is that the tree trunk alone is at least 5 square meters, even if the proportion of the tree is slightly smaller than water. If it can be converted into weight, the tree trunk alone is almost more than 5 tons, more than 10,000 kgs. How did you get this big guy off the hillside? Chapter 112, Wedge Oil Press. Shi Xiong discovered that he had really underestimated the North American Indians of this era before. In the eyes of Stone Bear, whether it is the Gaoshu tribe or other North American Indians, they are similar to the nomads of the ancient North China, backward and ignorant. But just now, what happened under Shi Xiong's eyelids made Shi Xiong fully realize that he was wrong before. And it was quite wrong. It turns out that although the North American Indians of this era are ignorant and backward, they are actually very smart. They are very good at summing up various experiences in life, and they use lithographs or tether knots to record this experience, let future generations avoid detours. The trunk of this big oak tree that has just been stripped completely weighs absolutely more than 10,000 kgs. If the stone bear is allowed to transport the wood down the mountain, he will really be blinded. But it took less than 2 hours for a group of people headed by Old Wood. This big log that made Stone Bear a little helpless was transported to the bottom of the mountain. The method is very simple. It is the most primitive rolling wood. While Shi Xiong touched his chin and wondered how to transport this large log down the mountain, a group of tribesmen led by the Old Wood made a lot of 2 to 3 meters long and thin thigh-thick logs. Some of these rolling logs were just picked from the branches of this big oak tree, and some were carried by the tribe from the tribe when they returned to the tribe. These guys first tied one end of the tree trunk with a rope, and then adjusted the direction of the big tree trunk together, and then put a log underneath and started to push a little distance and place the second and third logs. Even if this heavy trunk presses some of the log into the soft soil, the log still exerts its due effect. Just like this, when the big tree trunk rolls faster and faster, it will use inertia to rush down the mountain for a long distance. After the tree trunk was blocked by the soil, a group of tribesmen began to repeat the previous work under the command of Old Wood. In this way, using rolling logs section by section, this big tree trunk weighing tens of thousands of kgs was forced to the bottom of the mountain by these tribesmen in a way similar to a relay. It's not enough to get to the bottom of the mountain. There is still a little distance from the tribe here. At this time, you can't use the rolling method. After all, there is no gap between here and the tribe. But these people still can't help it. More than 20 tribesmen quickly returned to the tribe. When they came back, one of them was holding a tamed bison. If this big tree trunk is dragged by humans, it is estimated that at least it can be dragged by dozens of holes. But changing to a tamed bison is different. These tall and strong guys are really powerful. 20 bison's towing kits are tied with long ropes, and the back is connected to the big tree trunk, and then 20 cows move forward together. The root of the big tree trunk was easily pulled, and the advancing speed of the bison was just as fast as the speed at which the tribes could replace their rolling logs. In this way, in just tens of minutes, the big log was transported to the clearing in the middle of the tribe. Then there was Shi Xiong, who was ashamed of the backwardness and ignorance of these people. Through this incident, if anyone dares to say that his people are stupid in the future, Shi Xiong promises a big ear scraper to instigate it. The big trunk is shipped here. Everything is easy to say. Build a shed. This is the first thing. The location of this tree trunk will be the oil press in the tribe from now on, so a shed or wooden house with a large enough area must be built here. At least it can accommodate this big tree trunk and the surrounding cooking equipment. Building a shed or a wooden house does not require Shi Xiong to worry about it, nor does the Old Wood and the family worry about it. The Old Wood can grab a junior at random and can lead the tribe to build the shed or wooden house. The Old Wood family will be under the guidance of Shi Xiong during this period of time to do a good plastic surgery on this big tree trunk. The stone bear uses this big tree trunk as an oil press, so it takes such a lot of effort to cast a double-handed saw, cut the tree, and get this big wood weighing 10,000 kilograms here. Yes, Without a modern oil press, Shi Xiong can only use the old-fashioned wedge oil press that the Chinese ancestors have used for thousands of years to press oil. Past life: Shi Xiong was born in his hometown in 1983. He has been living in his hometown when he was a child and when he was in middle school. In the 1990s, the only oil press in that small mountain village was still using the oldest wedge oil press to extract oil for the villagers and the surrounding villagers. And the owner of this oil mill is Shi Xiong's fourth grandfather. So when I was young, Shi Xiong played in the oil mill or helped. When I was a child, I played there because there are countless leftovers. A group of children can dig holes in it. The most important thing is that the smell in the oil mill is very good, and the stone bear especially likes it. After going to middle school, Shi Xiong would come to the oil press at the fourth grandpa's house to help every summer and winter vacation. If you help today at that time, Grandpa 4 would give you 2 yuan, and he would also take care of a meal at noon. This is not a small income for the Shi Xiong family, whose family conditions are not very good. So www.wuxiaspa.com for the wedge oil press in Grandpa 4's house. Shi Xiong couldn't be more familiar with it. The wedge oil press of the fourth grandfather of Shi Xiong is made of an old locust tree trunk with a length of 4 meters and a diameter of a little over 1 meter. The trunk that Shi Xiong got is a bit shorter, but it's not a big problem. However, this trunk is much thicker than the trunk used in Grandpa 4's oil press, so the oil cake compartment can be made bigger by then. The structure of this wedge oil press is actually very simple. The press body of the entire oil press is this large wooden column. On the side of the press body, a 2.5 meter long rectangular wooden trough will be excavated. This rectangular wooden trough is the press bed. A circular groove is cut in the middle of the press bed with a diameter of about 70 centimeters or larger. This circular groove is the oil cake compartment, and there will be several small holes under the oil cake compartment, which are the oil leak holes. The entire press is composed of a rectangular squeeze chamber and a circular oil cake chamber. When using this original oil press to press oil, first fill the oil cake compartment with crushed oil cakes, and then stuff wood blocks from the squeeze compartment on the right side of the oil cake compartment, which is also full. When the wood blocks and oil cakes are all stuffed up and squeeze it up, then smash the triangular wooden wedges from the gaps in the wood blocks. As the wooden wedges continue to smash in, the wooden pieces will become tighter and tighter, and by the way, the oil cake in the oil cake compartment will become tighter and tighter. If one wooden wedge is not enough, use 2 wooden wedges. When the wooden wedges are smashed in more and more, under the huge pressure brought by the wood, those oil cakes will begin to seep out. This is the working principle of the wedge oil press. And because the wooden wedge plays a key role in the entire oil pressing process, this very primitive oil press is named the wedge oil press. Chapter 113. 1. Squeeze. Although the structure of the wedge oil press is simple, it is not so easy to turn this big tree trunk into a qualified wedge oil press. Apart from anything else, just taking out the squeeze cabin and the oil cake cabin from this tree trunk is a very complicated job. If you have a complete set of modern tools in later generations, you can play with this big tree trunk as you like, and you can choose any of 365 positions. But in this era, in the high tree tribe lacking all kinds of woodworking tools, it is really not an easy task to pull out a press bed from such a large trunk. If the squeeze chamber in the press bed is rectangular because it is a good idea, then taking out the round oil cake chamber is a huge challenge for the old wood family. However, Laomu is indeed the old carpenter who has held the title of the first carpenter of the Gaoshu tribe for decades. After discovering that it was almost impossible to pull out a circular oil cake cabin from the trunk of the tree, Laomu the family immediately decided to solve this problem from another aspect. The main function of the oil cake compartment is to hold the oil cake, and then squeeze out the oil contained in the oil cake through the squeezing force at both ends. Therefore, for the oil cake tank, there is almost no pressure around it. The main stress points of the oil cake tank are at the 2 ends of the oil cake tank. These 2 parts are the most difficult parts. After figuring out the working principle of the entire oil press, Old Wood actively sought to change it. He suggested that the upper part of the oil cake compartment should be sawn. Anyway, The stress point of the oil cake compartment is not in that position. After sawing, a semicircular oil cake compartment can be taken out from the lower part of the tree trunk, and the sawed upper part is at the same time. Half of it also took out a semicircular oil cake compartment. In this way, when you put the oil cake, open the upper part. After the oil cake is finished, cover the upper part, and finally block it with a thick wooden stick, then use it as usual. Anyway, the squeezed oil will always drip from below, not from above or from the side. This is absolutely no problem. Shi Xiong agreed to this method, so after 5 or 6 days, the oil press was successfully completed. Although this oil press is not the same as the one in the fourth grandfather of Shi Xiong, Shi Xiong estimates the effect is the same. Now that it is done, the next step is to experiment to see if this oil press can squeeze out oil. The oil press is placed on a sturdy wooden base. These wooden bases are made of logs with the thickness of the thigh, which are enough to support this heavy wedge oil press. The reason why this old-fashioned wedge oil press uses such a thick trunk is mainly because the wooden wedges smashed into the oil press will produce a great squeezing force when the oil press is working. If you squeeze the body thin, it is very likely to be broken. That's why this old-fashioned wedge oil press is made with very thick tree trunks in order to prevent it from breaking apart. After all, the thicker the trunk, the stronger it is. On the evening of the first day of the experimental oil press, snow flew in the sky again. Although the snowflakes this time were not as big as the first heavy snow, the snow was bigger than the first snow. Snowflakes fluttered all night, but there were still no small ones by the next morning. And looking at the sky, this snow is estimated to be at least still the next day. The people of the tribe got up early in the morning, first cleaning the snow on their respective roofs, and then began to clean the snow in the tribe. Finally, after having breakfast, they gathered at the oil press. That's right, this house, which was opened up by 3 wooden houses, has been named Oil Pressing Workshop by Shi Xiong. People are very curious about how the oil press is squeezed out. Even Ferguson came to the oil press with hard bones and rabbit mouth. It was too cold, and there was no way to experiment in heavy snow, so Ferguson simply took a day off. The people in the tribe have never eaten oil, and the fat from the captured prey will be refined into oil, so fat is not a rare thing for the people of the Gaoshu tribe. It is rare to be able to squeeze the oil out of peanuts. So many people came, and Shi Xiong was also very happy. Oil extraction requires a lot of manpower, and these clansmen who watch the excitement can just help. Under the command of Shi Xiong, the earth stove that had been built a long time ago ignited the fire, and a large iron pot was built on it, with sand placed in it, and about 100 caddies of shelled peanut kernels. To squeeze peanut oil, the most important process is 1 frying and 2 steaming, of which frying is the most critical step. When squeezing oil at the fourth grandfather's house, most of the villagers in the village used rapeseed to squeeze oil. In that era, no one was willing to use peanuts to squeeze oil. Regardless of whether it is rapeseed oil or peanut oil, it must be cooked before pressing. When frying rapeseed, you don't need to add sand, just put it in the pot and fry it. But you must add sand to fry the peanuts, otherwise the peanuts will not be cooked even if the outside is fried. Only by adding sand to fry, can the peanuts be heated more evenly, and the heating time will be longer, so that the peanuts can be thoroughly cooked. Shi Xiong took a big shovel and stood on a big rock next to the stove. Reading www.ukenshu.com began to fry peanut kernels with a shovel. The peanut kernels must be fried, and the moisture inside must be fried as much as possible. The standard is that they are fragrant and not burnt. The step of speculation is a step that requires a lot of experience. Generally, ordinary people can't do this kind of work, and that requires an experienced master to speculate. Back then, Shi Xiong was able to fry the rapeseed oil for the fourth grandfather, so he can be regarded as an experienced master, so he has to cook it himself. He was worried about other people. Just a little peanuts, it would be troublesome to fry a pot. Put out the fire, and then pass it through a sieve to remove the sand and leave the fried peanut kernels. Then Shi Xiong greeted several people from the tribe, put the fried peanuts into the stone mill and began to grind them. Taking advantage of this gap, Shi Xiong began to fry the second pot of peanuts. It's one pot and one pot, and the ground peanut kernels will be put away, wrapped in cotton cloth, and placed in another steamer for cooking. Once you have made up a big pot, turn on the fire and start steaming. After the ground peanut kernel powder is steamed to a certain temperature, the powder is formed by hand, and then it can be taken out and pressed. The so-called pressure plate is to make oil pancakes. The specific method is to put the right powder into a container made of iron rings and dry thatch, and then compact it. The iron ring was cast by the stone bears compared to the diameter of the oil cake cabin. It was slightly smaller than the diameter of the oil cake cabin and was about 10 centimeters wide. Spread a large amount of dry thatch in the iron ring, then put the right powder into the thatch, and then cover the thatch that has grown out, and then ram it with a wooden hammer. In the end, these powders will form a pancake wrapped in iron rings and thatch, and put them into the pancake compartment together with the iron rings to prepare for pressing. This process is one squeeze. Chapter 114, It and number 039:S oily. After making the oil pancakes, the next step is to squeeze them. Now at the far left end of the oil cake compartment, which is the other end of the oil cake compartment, place a round stove. This kind of stove is the key to oil extraction. The diameter is slightly smaller than the iron ring used to make the oil cake. It is located at both ends of the oil cake compartment. When oil is pressed, the oil cake is squeezed by pointing to the two pieces of stove wood. After placing the stoves, the 12 prepared oil cakes and iron rings were put into the oil cake compartment one by one, squeezing each other very tightly, just enough to fill the whole oil cake compartment. Each pancake is about 30 kilograms, and these 12 pancakes are 360 kilograms of crushed peanuts. Finally, put a piece of wood on the right end of the oil cake tank again, and the work of the oil cake tank is completely finished. Next, we will put a square wooden block into the squeeze cabin. 8 square wooden blocks were stuffed into the rectangular squeeze chamber one by one, filling the squeeze chamber completely, and the leftmost wooden block was in contact with the thick stove at the right end of the oil cake chamber. At this time, all the work of pressing is finished, and the next step is the last process of pressing the oil, which is to smash a triangular wooden wedge into the gap of the 8 square wooden blocks in the pressing cabin. In front of this oil press, an old wood set up a shelf. The shelf is more than 3 meters high. 2 ropes hang down from the upper beam. The ends of the ropes are tied with 2 thighs thick and about 1.5 meters long. Log. These 2 logs are tools for smashing wooden wedges. If you want to smash the triangular wooden wedge into the square wooden block that is already tightly packed, you must use great force. Although it can be hit with a sledgehammer, it is a very laborious task. After all, the wooden wedges have to be smashed into the square wooden block sideways instead of downwards, so smashing the wooden wedges with a hammer is definitely one thing, an extremely laborious task. The most important thing is that this kind of work of swinging the hammer horizontally is easy to miss if one is not done well. So Shi Xiong made such a wooden frame according to the method used in the oil press of the 4th grandfather's house in the previous life. 2 logs were hung from 2 different positions on the beam of the wooden frame. The principle used is like a bell hammer used to ring a bell. As long as the height is locked, when the log is swung up, it will accurately hit the triangular wooden wedge every time, so there is no need to worry about it. And each of these 2 logs weighed more than 200 kilograms. Once they were swung up, the force of hitting the triangular wooden wedge was even greater than the force of a sledgehammer. The most important thing is that using this method, the operator can swing up the log with only a small amount of effort, which is much easier than using a sledgehammer. Shi Xiong personally stood in front of the log on the far right, and then pushed the hanging log. The log swayed quickly. Bang! Accompanied by a dull knocking sound, the triangular wooden wedge was smashed in for a short section, and then after a second or two, the same sound was heard again, and the wooden wedge was smashed in again for a short section. All the tribesmen stared at everything in front of them dumbfounded, and they found that the press bed, which was originally packed so that they could no longer put things down, was smashed inward with this wooden wedge. Whether it was a block or a block, the oil pancakes actually started to move, and they seemed to be packed tighter than before. But the question is, Can it squeeze out that peanut oil just by squeezing it? People don't believe it very much. But as the stone bear smashed the wooden wedge into the squeeze chamber, the pointed rabbit's mouth pointed at the pottery basin under the oil press and shouted loudly, "Look, look, oil is dripping underneath." The eyes of the people were all attracted by the cry of the rabbit's mouth. Suddenly, there was a coax, and the sound of discussion broke out uncontrollably. The people of these tribes are very surprised. They have all seen peanuts. They also admit that this kind of small round beans is more delicious, and it is much more delicious than the kind of yellow beans, but they can't think of it. After being fried and crushed, it can still be used to squeeze out the oil. Shi Xiong is naturally full of confidence. In the previous life, the fourth grandfather could squeeze oil from rapeseed at home, not to mention peanut kernels with higher oil content. If you can't squeeze the oil, it's a hell. After clapping his hands, Shi Xiong let go of the log and beckoned to the Kuai-ma on the side. The Kuai-ma, who had been waiting for a long time, ran to the second hanging log under the envious gaze of a group of people. In front of the stone bear smashed the first wooden wedge in, just to give a demonstration to the people. He won't finish all the work. In his last life, he did not squeeze oil less at the fourth grandfather's house. He had done enough for a long time. He didn't want to continue working as an oil squeezer after wearing this age. The following work will be done by Kuai-ma. Watching Kuai-ma push the log to smash the second wooden wedge into the squeeze cabin. At this moment, Shi Xiong's thoughts not only floated back to the time when he helped to extract oil at the fourth grandpa's house in the previous life. www.wuxiasp.com. Old Stone. The family's oil press is well known in the 8 townships in a radius of 10 miles. Not only the people in the village press oil here, but the people in the nearby villages also drove the ox cart or donkey cart to pull the oil to press the oil. The fourth grandfather also told Shi Xiong a lot of things before when he was okay. Grandpa Shi said that this oil mill was there before liberation, but at that time it was Grandpa Sis who worked with Shi Xiong's grandfather. At that time, the countryside was relatively poor, and no one was willing to use peanuts to squeeze oil. Most of them used rapeseed to squeeze oil. Was later liberated. During the land reform, this oil press was confiscated and confiscated. However, no one could press oil at that time. In the end, Shi Xiong's grandfather exchanged 25 pallets of grain for this oil press. Then, Grandpa passed away, and Grandpa Fourth took over the oil press. When Grandpa Fourth took over the oil press, that era was still in the period of a large collective production team. At that time, the rapeseed of the production team had to be squeezed, so they had to contact the fourth grandpa in advance to arrange the number, so as not to lose money. And when it is the turn of the brigade to extract oil, the captain will select 4 or 5 people to help Grandpa Fourth, very orderly. However, after the production responsibility system in the 1980s, the oil extraction situation returned to the pre-liberation pattern. The fourth grandfather had to extract oil every year until the Chongyang festival in September of the lunar calendar. In the fourth grandpa's oil press, a pound of rapeseed can be exchanged for $2 or $3 of oil, and the old folks who came to add oil, if there is not enough oil, then several families will work together to squeeze them. If a certain household pulls a lot of oil, it's okay for someone to squeeze it alone. Although there was no new-style oil press at that time, the business of Grandpa Four's oil press was very prosperous. The folks in the radius of more than a dozen li would pull the oil to line up early in the morning, even in the 1990s. Chapter 115, Touch the Scene. The folks at that time are okay. When Grandpa Four talked about past events in his free time, he would sigh with his pipe and pot. At that time, when the folks came to squeeze oil, they all dried and selected the raw materials at home before pulling them over. This saved us a lot of things. At that time, the folks pulled the oil into the oil mill, and they would take the raw materials, weigh it and record it in the account, and divide the oil in proportion. After the squeezing, the folks with few raw materials simply don't squeeze the oil, but just exchange a few kilograms of oil and leave. I remember the words of Grandpa Fourth. Those folks were really good at that time. After all, The preparations for oil extraction were quite cumbersome, just sifting and drying is a very laborious task. But these jobs were done in advance by the folks. Those years saved a lot of time and energy for the workers in the oil press. Shi Xiong remembers very clearly that the oil press at the fourth grandpa's house contains more oil than the oil press he has come out now. Regardless of the thickness of this oil press, it is a lot shorter, so the oil cake tank can only hold 360 kilograms of oil at most. And the oil press of Grandpa C's house was able to hold 450 caddies of oil back then. The most important thing is that after the folks come to the oil press, they will spontaneously help as long as they can. Some help to prepare firewood, some help to push the ground material, some help to steam the powder, some help to press the plate, and some help to squeeze. Anyway, none of the folks who came to the oil mill were idle. The folks of that era were really like a family, unlike the next 20 years, even if the feelings between the folks have become weak. Yeah, this oil is getting more and more. This oil is really clear. Much clearer than the oil refined from fatty meat. This oil should be delicious. You only know how to eat. You didn't hear the Guardian say that this oil is used for cooking. But what is cooking? Is it delicious? The turbulent sound of discussion pulled Shi Xiong back from the memory. He can't help sighing a little bit emotionally. The fourth grandfather has passed away a long time ago, and he has also inexplicably passed through this era, and his parents and little sisters will never be seen again. Shook his head, tossing away the sadness in his head. Shi Xiong walked to the oil press and squatted down, carefully watching the first basin of oil he had squeezed out in this era. This pot of oil is called top oil according to the old name. However, because the first squeezed oil is squeezed by steaming the flour grains to raise the temperature, the first squeezed oil has heavier moisture, muddy color, bad appearance, and easy to accumulate oil. But it is fragrant when used for stir-frying vegetables and deep-fried tofu, very much. In fact, not only the first squeezed oil, even the second squeezed oil tastes not top-notch. The reason is very simple. Grandpa IV said that for this kind of oil squeezed by wood squeezing method, it is best not to contact the oil with metal objects. Only the oil squeezed out like that is called an incense. But the metal ring is used when pressing the plate, even if it is the best metal. Once it comes into contact with the oil, the taste of the squeezed oil is not pure. The fourth grandpa also said that when wood press was used in some southern provinces, the pressing plate was not made of iron rings, but bamboo sticks were used to make bamboo plates. This kind of oil cake made with bamboo plate, the oil is more fragrant. But in this era, in such a backward Indian tribe, it is already very good to be able to squeeze vegetable oil. As for the taste, let's let it go first. After Kuwema completely smashed the second wooden wedge into the squeeze chamber, more and more oil leaked down the oil drip hole. It didn't take long for him to pick up two large pots, which were 60 or 70 Jinyu. When the oil stops dripping, the pressing process is complete. However, the oil cakes left over from the oil pressing can still be used for the second pressing. But that requires some preliminary work. The wooden wedge squeezed the wood block in the squeeze cabin very tightly, but that's okay. At the other end of the squeeze cabin, Ishikama held a hammer in one hand and a slender wooden wedge in the other hand, aiming at the one that was smashed in at the beginning. Hit the wooden wedges lightly with a hammer a few times and the two wooden wedges will be easily smashed out. After all the wood blocks in the squeeze cabin were taken out, the 12 oil cakes in the oil silo were completely squeezed together, and it was difficult to break them apart by hand. At this time, the hammer and the long slender wooden wedge in Shi Xiong's hand were useful again. Align the gap between the two oil cakes, smash a few hammers lightly, and the oil cakes squeezed together will be separated. Then he uncovered the dry thatch wrapped around the oil cake, took out the oil inside, and continued to put it in the stone mill and grind it again, in order to crush the remaining oil more thoroughly. After is finished, it will continue to be steamed in the pot again. This is the second steaming in the one frying and two steaming process in the oil extraction process. After the steaming, the oil will be pressed again, but this time the press is tighter than the first press. Not only does it need to be smashed with a mallet, but even with a foot. Finally, These oils were pressed into 12 oil cakes. Again www.wuxiaspot.com. Squeezed again for the second squeezing. As the 2 wooden wedges were smashed into the squeeze cabin again, the clansmen who were watching the excitement around were again surprised to find that the oil began to drip again. The oil dripped this time is the second squeezed oil. Compared with the first pressing oil, the second pressing oil is more clear and tastes better. The amount of second squeezed oil is a little less than that of first squeezed oil, but it is 50 or 60 caddies. A total of less than 130 kilograms of peanut oil was squeezed twice, and the oil yield reached 35%! The oil output rate is already very high, especially when using this wood press technology to press oil. The oil output rate can be 35%, which is already very high. Don't forget that the peanuts used in this oil extraction are not specially cultivated peanut varieties specially cultivated for oil extraction with a high oil yield of 45% in later generations. Regardless of whether it is the first press or the second press, filter it again to filter out the impurities in it. Then peanut oil that is almost identical to later generations will be completely published. At this time, the tribesmen were allowed to step forward and watch the freshly baked peanut oil up close. The fragrant peanut oil naturally aroused the people's sigh. Oil pressing is over at this time. Although the oil yield of peanut kernels is quite high, it usually ends after pressing twice. No amount of oil can be squeezed out. But the peanut meal left over from the oil cannot be thrown away. This thing is also a good thing. Is like the soybean meal left over from soybean oil extraction in later generations. It is an excellent material whether it is used as fertilizer on the ground or as feed for livestock. This is the same with the peanut meal left over after the oil is squeezed. If used on the ground, the effect is no worse than later generations of chemical fertilizers. And feeding cows mixed with forage can make the tamed bison in the tribe eat happily. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116, Open a Small Stove. Was busy working all morning, and finally squeezed out 130 caddies of peanut oil. Now the people in the tribe will have a good taste. The later generations of China's gluttons all understand the truth. Except for the few dishes that are counted, the taste of big pot dishes will never be better than small stir-fry. In fact, the history of human development is also the history of food. In the oldest primitive age, because there was no pot, no tools for cooking dishes, no oil, salt, sauce, vinegar and various spices, and even the most important fire, the primitive people of the primitive age could only live by drinking blood. Life. When the fire began to be applied, the human diet immediately improved by leaps and bounds. The transition from raw food to cooked food has not only greatly improved the taste of food, but the most important thing is the popularity of cooked food, which has greatly improved the lifespan of human beings. Then, with the popularity of oil, salt, sauce and vinegar, food began to develop more refined and delicious. In many high-level people, food is no longer for the stomach, but for the appetite. The ancestors of China have been working hard to improve the taste of dishes thousands of years ago. Master Kong has even put forward the famous saying that the food is not tired of being fine and not tired of being meticulous. On the European continent, although the exquisiteness and taste of the food is far less than the various dishes developed by the ancestors of China, the taste of the dishes on the tables of some nobles is also quite good. Even the Inca civilization of South America and the Maya civilization of China and America are quite advanced in the way of making dishes. Only in the prosperous North American continent, for thousands of years, the food of these North American Indians who have lived by water and grass has still been dominated by fruit belly. As for the taste of the food, it can only Stone bears had never eaten any delicious dishes since they traveled to the Cherokee tribe of this age. Well, there is no such thing as dishes in the Gaoshu tribe. The food here is the meat of various animals obtained from hunting, except for the grain sown from the ground. To say that the ingredients are also good, they are all natural, pollution-free and pure wild, but the way of cooking in the High Tree tribe is really hard to compliment. Except that there is no big difference between the boiled porridge and the various porridges of later generations. The meat is all washed, cut into pieces, water sprinkled with salt and stewed in a large pot. Whether it is rare venison, bear meat, various wild birds, or bison everywhere, the only processing method is to stew in a pot of white water and salt. At the beginning, you might think it tastes good. After all, they are pure wild animals, and they are very rare ingredients in later generations. But when you eat this 2 days a day, eat it like this for a week or 2 weeks, or still eat it like this for a month or 2, even if you stew a pot of dragon meat and phoenix meat, you probably won't be able to swallow it. For native North American Indians, it is natural to eat this way, but for a foodie whose soul has accepted the exquisite dishes for more than 10 years in the previous life, it is really unbearable to eat like this every day. Otherwise, Shi Xiong would make tofu and squeeze oil in his spare time. Isn't it just the delicious bite? To say something very bad, these people of the Gaoshu tribe are all buns who have never eaten good things, so even if Shi Xiong made several pots of beef stew with potatoes in a big pot, he still completely conquered these guys. Use deep-fried potato pieces and stewed over-ripe beef together to stew for a while. Even if there are only a few spices and condiments such as allspice and chili, it still makes the people's mouth full of oil. In the past, people ate beef stewed in white water and salt, but potatoes were stewed in the same white water and salt in addition to steaming. How can the taste be so good? They never thought that after the potatoes were fried and then stewed with the overcooked beef, the taste would become so wonderful. The unique scent of potatoes after being oiled is mixed with the meaty scent of wild beef, plus a few handfuls of peppers sprinkled before the pan. The fresh and spicy taste makes people want to swallow their tongues in their stomachs. Only then did the people know what the guardian Sama used such a lot of effort to get this bit of oil. Very good, very powerful. For the people of the tribe, ironware is certainly important, and salt is more important. But this delicious dish is obviously more important than the first two. Several women in the tribe who were responsible for cooking followed Shi Xiong for noon, and finally learned how to make potato stew, and then they would be responsible for cooking this dish for the tribe. Seeing the people of the tribe ate their mouths full of oil and smiled, Shi Xiong also had a sense of complacency. However, Shi Xiong did not stay to eat with the tribe. He just filled a large bowl of beef stew with potatoes in a large pottery bowl that he usually drank porridge, and then smiled with a big bowl of steaming dishes and walked towards the Kabru sacrifice, living wooden house. The clansmen outside ate a big pot of rice under the leadership of Lile. www.wuxiaspot.com. Then, as the guardians of the Kabul sacrifice, we have to accompany the great Kabru sacrifice to open a small stove. There are a few people in the wooden house where Hong Yi-un lives, mainly Hong Yi-un's best friends, such as Moma Grass, Mangrove Vine, and Lambflower. The 3 Indian ladies were not idle either. Today, the 3 of them were busy all morning, and they came up with a box of tofu. They still have Hong Yi-un waiting for Master Guardian to come over and make them more delicious small stir-fry. I met Lieutenant Ferguson and Koima, who was sitting on the road eating potato stew, and he called them together. This group of Indian women's fierce stone bears have a deep understanding. If they go alone, they will inevitably have to be molested at the dinner table, so he simply brought 2 new forces over. There are 2 of them, how much can also share some firepower. Sure enough, when Koima and Lieutenant Ferguson entered the wooden house where Hong Yi-un lived, the noisy ladies immediately stopped talking. Fast horse is better, after all, he is a tribe, but Lieutenant Ferguson is an out-and-out blonde little handsome pot. Before he got acquainted with him, these ladies were embarrassed to have trouble. The wooden house where Hong Yi-un lives is very large. It is the second only to the chamber in the entire tribe. There is a stove that is unknown how many years old is in the corner of the house, but it has already been picked up by Momo Cow and the others. Today's tofu is made on this stove. In addition to the box of hot tofu, there are also a lot of cut beef, wild boar, venison, and pheasant. The dried beans, freshly cut pumpkin, and washed potatoes are also ready. And what makes Shi Xiong most happy is that he found green onions and onions here. Chapter 117, Cadres go to the countryside. 4 dishes and 1 soup. Green onions are good thing, absolutely good, and humans have a long history of eating green onions. Welsh onions are originally produced in the western region of China and Central Asia. As early as the Han Dynasty, some people started to grow green onions on the land of China. As early as the Han Dynasty's Book of Yindui, there was Zhong Kongpian, and in the Si-minutes Shuling written in the 2nd century AD, there is such a record: the summer onion is white and the winter onion is white and big. It can be seen that people at that time had been growing green onions all year round. Later, green onions spread to Europe and became an indispensable vegetable on the European table. Many people's love for green onions is not inferior to that of Chinese people. It is like there is a traditional cuisine in Catalonia, Spain. The name is roasted green onions. In the small city of Bars, there is even a roasted green onion festival every year. After Columbus discovered the New World, Scallion came to the New World with the transport ships of European colonists across the ocean, and soon took root in the New World and spread quickly in the New World. Onions and green onions have similar transmission routes. This crop originating in Central Asia was introduced to Europe a long time ago, and then to the New World of North America. This kind of spicy green onions was spread from the Pueblo people more than 100 years ago, but the tribe doesn't grow much. You may not pay attention to it, so you didn't find the green onions. Momocao stood. Shi Xiong explained quietly beside him. Shi Xiong slapped his forehead and said, "You guys, you should tell me if you have these good things in the tribe. If you told me earlier, then there will be a lot of good food on our table." After a pause, Shi Xiong said seriously, "If you have nothing to do in the past few days, please count the things in the tribe. I need a detailed list. I don't want to miss anything." Han Yun nodded, and Shi Xiong happily started to open the small stove. When Lao Mu's family was making a wedge oil press, Shi Xiong arranged for Kuma to cast a frying spoon. The casting craftsmanship in the tribe is already very good, so the casting scoop is quite similar to that of later generations. As a concrete nerd in his previous life, Shi Xiong is not like most nerds who do not touch the sun with his fingers. Don't think he spends most of his time ordering takeaways to solve stomach problems, but in fact, Shi Xiong's cooking skills are still very good. Not bad. The second son of the 4th grandfather of Shi Xiong, who is Shi Xiong's second cousin, is a cook, and he happened to open a restaurant in the city where Shi Xiong went to college. Although the restaurant is not big, it is better than cooking in the ground. When I was in college, Shi Xiong would not go home during the holidays. Instead, he would work in the restaurant of the second cousin. After a few years, he also learned a good cooking skill from the second cousin. In fact, the main reason why Shi Xiong learned to cook with his second cousin back then was because he firmly believed in the saying, if you want to keep a person, you must first keep her stomach. That Cao Nian dreamed about a beautiful, gentle and obedient Gu Liang who was conquered by his own cooking skills, and then followed himself without hesitation. Then after 4 years of college, I let this Cao Nian fully understand the meaning of the lyrics in Wang Liang's certain song. Fairy tales are all deceptive. Although he didn't use his own craft to leave even a dinosaur to live with him, at any rate this cooking craft was left behind. Every year when I go home during the Chinese New Year, Shi Xiong alone prepares the New Year's Eve dinner. The old man, my mother, and the little girl said it was delicious. Now, the cooking skills that Shi Xiong has learned more than 250 years later have finally spanned 2.5 centuries and tens of thousands of kilometers of space, once again presented at the foot of the Great Smoky Mountains. After the frying spoon was burned with sand, brush it clean, and then burned on the stove with blue smoke. Pour the base oil, throw in a handful of green onion and a handful of chopped peppers. A fragrant and spicy nose suddenly broke out. A series of coughs suddenly burst out of Hong Yun and the others' mouths, which could not be suppressed. Using a hot pepper pot is not something ordinary people can handle, and Lieutenant Ferguson's coughing blush has a thick neck. When the oil in the pot turned red, Shi Xiong poured the cut tofu in and started to scoop it up. Under the dumbfounded gaze of the crowd in the room, a flame burst out from the frying spoon, and a scent of tofu came out. I flipped the spoon a few times, and after the flame in the pot went out, Shi Xiong put the frying spoon on the stove, simmered it for a while, added salt, and then out of the pot. A red and white spicy tofu is out of the pot. Although there are no other condiments, this dish is still very attractive and the taste is definitely quite good. After all, this is not braised tofu. What this dish needs is the spiciness of chili and the aroma of tofu itself. No other condiments are needed. A pottery plate of steaming spicy fried tofu was placed on the stone table, and all of them swallowed. The second one is to put potatoes, venison, chili, and dried beans together, and a simple version of chaotic stew came, and the fragrance also made the eyes of the whole room look into the frying spoon. The third dish is a spicy fried beef tenderloin. Although the beef cut into strips is not marinated, it is bison beef, a purely original ingredient that will hardly be eaten in later generations. The meat is taken from the tenderloin near the spine of the beef. Although there is no condiment to marinate, it can be very smooth and tender with oil. www.wuxiaspot.com. Then it is still a hot pot, mixed with onions, and finally cooked. Put the beef tenderloin into the wok and stir fry, then add salt and take it out of the wok. The fourth dish is pumpkin stew with potatoes. Cut the pumpkin and potatoes into small pieces, add onions, and then stir fry the wild boar in a pot with green onions. Finally, put the pumpkin, potatoes and onions into the pot and stir fry, add water and simmer for a while. As for the last dish, it is a chicken stew. This chicken is a pure and white pheasant, not a turkey raised in the tribe. Clean stewed chicken is actually very good. Stir fry it in hot water, skim off the froth, then add ginger, wine and water to stew directly. When it is almost cooked, add salt and it can be cooked. The wine is the whiskey brought by Major Hank last time. Ishikama left a bottle, but he was not willing to drink it. This time the chicken stew was used. If it weren't for the condiments, Shi Xiong really wanted to give them the most famous dish in his hometown, Yumeng fried chicken, and ensure that they swallow all their tongues in their stomachs. But this stewed chicken is not only a dish, but also a soup. Chicken can be eaten, chicken soup can be drunk. 5 dishes were laid out on the stone table, and there was a serious 4 dishes and 1 soup for the cadres to go to the countryside. But how to eat these dishes, it really makes the whole house difficult. Without him, Lieutenant Ferguson didn't know how to put these exquisite dishes into their mouths because they didn't have knives and forks, and Hong Yun and the others because they were steaming hot. They didn't know how to use chopsticks or knives. Forks, except for spoons, they can only grasp with their hands. Only Ishikama, sitting at the stone table leisurely, took out a pair of wooden chopsticks from his animal skin bag, and then caught a chopstick dish under the dumbfounded gaze of a group of people, and put it in his mouth. Eat it with relish. Chapter 118. There is food but no wine. One big regret was a good meal, but in the end it became a teaching session to learn how to use chopsticks. If it is in normal times, it is estimated that Lieutenant Ferguson and Hong Yun will not learn how to use chopsticks. After all, although this thing looks simple, it consists of only 2 wooden bars, but if you want to master how to use chopsticks, it is really not a easy thing. But now, under the temptation of these fragrant dishes, under the condition of Master Guardian's strict hand grasping, whether it is Hong Yun or Lieutenant Ferguson, they have all learned how to use chopsticks obediently. The most important thing is that the words of Lord Guardian shocked Hong Yun and his group of Native American Indians. The 2 wooden sticks I hold in my hand are called chopsticks. In the far and great East, there is a great nation. This nation is called the Huaxia Nation. The tool like chopsticks was invented from that great nation. In that great nation, all people use chopsticks. The Supreme Sun once told me that our fellow Indians living on this land were separated from that great nation more than 10,000 years ago. Therefore, we have the same root and the same origin as that great nation. Since we share the same roots with that great nation, then we must learn from that nation of our compatriots, because that nation is now the most powerful country and nation in the world. We cannot discredit this nation, nor can we let it people look down on us. So, From now on, you should start with the most basic learning, such as learning how to use chopsticks. Originally, Hong Yun and the others didn't know why Master Guardian used such a difficult tool to pick up dishes, but when they heard what Master Guardian said, they immediately understood why. It turned out that there is still a great nation in the Far East as a compatriot, and that great nation will be so powerful. The most important thing is that the Supreme Sun also said that we must learn from that compatriot. Even the Supreme Sun said so. Who would dare to oppose the words of Lord Guardian? Even Hong Yun, the high priest of Kabru, had to obey the will of God obediently. So, a room of people began to learn how to use chopsticks. Fortunately, this thing is much simpler than making knives and forks, otherwise Shi Xiong would not know where to get 7 or 8 pairs of chopsticks out in a while. Although the process of learning how to use chopsticks is a very sour and refreshing process, but under the temptation of delicious food, after this meal, at least no one intends to grasp the dishes with their hands. Of course, this small stove not only taught Hong Yun and the others how to use chopsticks, but also helped them understand some things. Are these dishes delicious? Undoubtedly, it is very, very delicious. For Hong Yun and the others, who had never eaten a small stir-fry, this small stove let them know that the food can still be done like this, and that the ordinary ingredients can still make such delicious foods. So do you want to continue eating this delicious food in the future, or do you eat this kind of delicacy every day? Undoubtedly, everyone present may have such a desire. But they also know that, at least in terms of the crops grown by the tribe, it is almost an extravagant wish to eat such delicious food every day. Tofu is delicious, but there are not many soybeans used to make tofu. The small stir-fry is delicious, but the peanuts used to squeeze the oil are also not much in the tribe. Not to mention that Master Guardian also said that wheat can be used to make white and fragrant big steamed buns, smooth and delicious noodles, and fragrant toast. Mixing with some crops can also make delicious wine. There are so many delicious foods that have not been made yet. But all this requires crops in the ground. Therefore, if you want to eat such delicious delicacies every day, you must plant a variety of crops so that this delicacy can appear on the table every day. The crops in the tribe are all taken care of by the women of the tribe, and the status of women in the tribe is very high. You must know that before the Cherokee tribe was driven out of the Great Lakes region, it was a matriarchal society, and everything in the tribe was determined by the women. Although after migrating to the Appalachian Mountains, the Cherokee began to gradually change from a matrilineal society to a patrilineal society, but at this time, the status of women in the tribe was still very high. The women in the tribe have the final say on what crops will be planted next year. So after a few women exchanged ideas, they immediately decided to continue to expand the cultivated area after the beginning of the spring next year, and strive to plant more crops in quantity and variety. Everything is for eating. How to manipulate the crops, Shi Xiong will not worry about that. With these fierce ladies, Shi Xiong won't worry about not having enough ingredients for next year. But this meal also made Shi Xiong a bit regretful, because there is food but no wine, which is really a great pity. Although Major Hank left the few bottles of whiskey, he brought in some low-grade distilled spirits when he left www.wuxiaspa.com. But for this kind of wine that the British drank, to be honest, Shi Xiong really couldn't drink the taste. Otherwise, the bottle of high-end whiskey Stone Bear left to him by Major Hank would not be kept until now and has not been drunk. So after returning to his wooden house, Shi Xiong wondered if he should make some wine by himself. It happens to be winter, and winter is the best season for winemaking, because whether it is making wine or making koji, the most important thing is temperature control. Don't look at the cold weather in winter, but when it's cold, you can add something like a brazier to heat up. If it is summer, the temperature itself is very high, and it is not so easy to control the appropriate temperature. It is easier to warm up than to cool down. So winter is the best season for wine making, but in summer, no one makes wine. Anyway, Ishikame's hometown makes wine in autumn and winter, and no one makes wine in the hottest summer. There are many raw materials needed to make wine: wheat, Barley, sorghum, corn, peas and other crops can be used for wine making. Even sweet potatoes and even potatoes can be used for making wine. Although there is not much corn and wheat in the tribe, there are a lot of sweet potatoes and potatoes. This high-yield crop was bestowed on mankind by God. It is not only delicious, but can also be used to make wine. Shi Xiong remembers that from the time he had a memory, the wine his family drank on New Year's and holidays was made from sweet potatoes or potatoes. At that time, my family was poor and I was reluctant to use rice or wheat to make wine. I used this high-yield crop as a raw material for wine making. Although the taste was not as good as rice or wheat wine, it was also very good. The most important thing is that if sweet potato wine or potato wine can be brewed, the taste is full of memories from childhood. Chapter 119, Boring the Donkey. Ishikame's alcohol volume is still very good, thanks to his alcohol test since he was a child. There is no way, at that time, the rural areas still attached great importance to male babies. When Shi Xiong was born, it was the time when family planning was the most critical. Shi Xiong heard the old mother say that at that time, because he was not sure whether the first child was a boy or a girl, Shi Xiong and his father were ready to take Shi Xiong and his mother out to become a superborn gorilla. In that era, if you want to be superborn, the consequences are quite terrifying. It is common to push houses to arrest people, but Shi Xiong and his father are still desperate to get a son. When the stone bear fell to the ground, his father saw that he was a man with a handle, and his joy was no longer mentioned. However, his father and his grandfather liked to drink, so whenever his father and his grandfather get together to drink, the little stone bear will be held by his grandfather, and he will dip his chopsticks in the wine. Lick. In the beginning, the little stone bear was naturally whaled by the spicy ghosts, but after a long time, he gradually got used to the taste, so that when he was in elementary school, it wouldn't work if he didn't drink during the holidays. This kind of thing is wrong. It is that he can enjoy it. Anyway, Shi Xiong and his sister are not qualified to enjoy it. No way, patriarchal. Although I drank very little back then, it was always alcohol exercise. In addition, both grandpa and daddy can drink. This ability was passed on to Shi Xiong, so Shi Xiong was known as the Buckus of their department when he went to college. Can drink, love to drink, and Ishikame can make wine himself. As mentioned earlier, Shi Xiong's family conditions were not very good when he was a child, and can only be regarded as ordinary people, so almost all the wine he drank at home was brewed by himself. In any case, the wine made by yourself is much cheaper than the wine sold outside. Shi Xiong's grandfather can make wine, and Shi Xiong's father can also make wine. When he arrived at Shi Xiong, when he was a child, he followed his grandfather and father to help make wine, so he also knew how to make wine. Who said that the children from the countryside don't know anything? I dare not say anything else. At the very least, Shi Xiong is very proficient in making koji, making wine, making tofu, and squeezing oil, and it is estimated that most of the children in the city will not be able to do them. Why do you children in the city look down on the children in my village? If you change to a child in the city and travel to the Gaoshu tribe, you let them squeeze oil and make tofu, they will fart, they will just eat. And our children from the countryside have done many things to help adults at home when they were young, so these inconspicuous technologies at that time have become the supreme sun in this place in this era. The magical skills. As far as winemaking is concerned, perhaps some children in the city know the steps and even the craftsmanship of winemaking because they read books, but if you want them to make wine, it is absolutely impossible to make them. You haven't done this kind of work yourself. Often, what you brew is not wine, but a jar of vinegar, or the smelly vinegar. Have you really seen how to make wine from the book? Don't say anything else. Do you know how to make koji? Without koji, you make a pea wine. Brewing in koji. This is a well-known thing, because koji contains a large number of microorganisms and various enzymes secreted by them, such as amylase, glucoamylase and protease. These enzymes have a biocatalytic effect and can convert starch and protein in grains into sugars and amino acids. The sugar can be broken down into ethanol under the action of yeast, which is alcohol. So it is an indisputable fact that the most critical core of winemaking is how to make koji. With a good koji, you can brew whatever you want, as long as you control the temperature and humidity. Even if you can't brew Mayalu, at least you won't brew a jar of sour and smelly unidentified liquid. There are many kinds of grains used in brewing, but there are not many grains that can be used to make koji. Anyway, according to Shi Xiong's knowledge, the main raw materials for making koji are wheat and rice. The distiller made by the former is called Meikyu, while the distiller made by the latter is called Mikdot. Of course, if it is divided according to the type, the koji is divided into wheat koji, mainly for brewing yellow wine, Dikyu, mainly used for brewing distilled spirits, Ziakyu, mainly used for brewing rice wine, and Ziak wine, red koji, mainly used to brew red wine. There is a new type of koji that has only been used in modern times, which can replace the Quinziak brand koji. Regardless of how it is classified, koji is an essential core additive for wine making. When I was making wine with my grandfather and dad in my hometown, Shi Xiong often followed his elders to make koji at home. At that time, most of the wine made in the family was sweet potato wine or potato wine, so most of the koji used was dikyu. This kind of wine made from sweet potatoes or potatoes does not taste so good if it is not distilled, but once it has been distilled, the resulting high-quality wine has a very strong taste, and people who can't drink enough can withstand it with a sip of the wine. I'm reading www.hukanshu.com. Therefore, this highly distilled liquor made from sweet potatoes or potatoes has a very resounding nickname in Shi Xiong's hometown, Boring Donkey. The meaning of is very simple. This kind of highly distilled liquor with a degree of 70 degrees, even if a strong donkey takes a sip, it has to be stuffed there. The koji made during brewing at home is made of wheat. Although it is reluctant to use wheat to make wine, it is not a big problem to use it to make koji. After all, when making wine, the amount of koji added is relatively small. Generally speaking, it is only 7 or 2 to use 100 katis of sweet potato to add koji. This ratio is still affordable for the family. But every time I make koji at home, I make more, because these koji can not only be used to make wine at home, but also can be sold out, which can add some extra money to the family. But making koji is not that easy. It is no exaggeration to say that the process of making koji is more complicated than brewing, and the control of temperature and humidity is much higher than that of brewing. In other words, people who have not done jayuk in person cannot make jayuk just by seeing the things in books or videos. In the process of making this thing, as long as one place is not done in place, then the finished thing will probably become another kind of thing. But this kind of work is not so difficult for Shi Xiong. After he went to middle school, every year when he made distiller's koji at home, he would follow the elders in his family as long as he had time, so he was quite familiar with making distiller's koji. There is no shortage of wheat in the tribe right now. If there is anything lacking, it is a music room with good thermal insulation performance. Well, it seems that a few simple thermometers and some boxes for stepping music need to be made. Chapter 120, Simple Thermometer. Whether it is making wine or making koji, the control of temperature and humidity is very important, especially temperature. When I used to make koji at home, I had a thermometer, so I don't have to worry about temperature control. But where is there such a thing as a thermometer in the Gaoshu tribe? The feeling of temperature here is entirely based on the body sensation, and the standard for judging the temperature is 3 cold, hot and not cold or hot, very comfortable. Therefore, it is very necessary to make a few simple thermometers. This kind of simple thermometer is very easy to make. As an associate researcher level senior intellectual, if the simple thermometer can't do it, he will be blinded for more than 10 years of schooling. In fact, Shi Xiong used to make a simple thermometer for his nephew in his previous life. At that time, in order to arouse children's interest in some physical phenomena, he made a simple thermometer. The consumable is a small bottle with a cap for penicillin, a plastic straw and some red ink. As for time consuming, more than 20 minutes. Sure enough, that little simple thermometer made my nephew very interested, and Shi Xiong, who was an uncle, also had a sense of accomplishment. But it was easy to make a simple thermometer at that time, because all kinds of materials were easy to find, but in the Gaoshu tribe, there were no glass bottles or plastic straws, so I had to get these things. If a real thermometer had been in a previous life, it could be made with a variety of tools, stone bears, but in this age, only this kind of simple thermometer can be made. A small glass bottle and a thin glass tube can make a simple thermometer, but the question is, where can I find glass bottles and thin glass tubes? Does I have to burn glass in order to make a few simple thermometers? Shi Xiong held his forehead and thought, but the problem is that although you know the raw materials for glass burning, you really haven't burned glass. Shook his head. Shi Xiong's gaze fell on the bottle of whiskey. Yes, there must be some glass products traded from Waxaku in the tribe. Although the transparency is not good and the color is not very beautiful, it can be used to blow a few small glass bottles and a few thin glass tubes after melting. It shouldn't be a problem, blowing glass bottles and blowing thin glass tubes. This living rock bear did it several times when he was doing experiments in high school. At that time, the high school chemistry teacher, who was almost 60 years old, Mr. Wu, was in school, because almost all the glass laboratory equipment in the school was made by the chemistry teacher himself. Ishikamo was in the town when he was in high school. In the late 1990s, the funding for education in mountain towns was very tight. When taking chemistry classes, students rarely had the opportunity to do experiments on their own. As an excellent chemistry teacher, in order to allow students to do more experiments, Mr. Wu makes a lot of glass laboratory equipment every year. It is said that Mr. Wu worked as a glassmaker in the county glass factory for a period of time in that buzzing age, so he has a lot of experience in the firing of some glass, including experimental equipment made of borosilicate glass. Ishikama liked to do chemistry experiments when he was in high school, and his grades were relatively good. So Mr. Wu also let Ishikama try to blow some experimental equipment such as flasks and thin glass tubes. Although it has been a long time since, the memory is still deeply imprinted in Shi Xiong's mind. I don't know how to burn the glass stone bear, but there are ready-made glass products in the tribe, as long as they are broken, melted, and then blown. There are ready-made crucibles. The crucible that can melt iron into molten iron is absolutely no problem for melting glass. The worst is a thin iron pipe. This is also simple. The big deal is to cast a small diameter thin iron pipe. Just do it. Ishikama pondered it over, and when he felt that there was nothing wrong with what he had on hand, let's do it. Ferguson and the others can cast a thin iron pipe, and they are willing to do it. After all, every time casting something is an improvement for them. Whether it is Ferguson, Hard Bones, Rabbit Mouths like to do it. So Shi Xiong gave this to Lieutenant Ferguson. The requirements were not high. The thickness of the thin iron pipe wall was not required, but the inner diameter could not be greater than 5 mm and the length could not be less than 1.2 meters. Such a fine caliber iron pipe was more difficult for Ferguson and the others, but they still took the task very happily. Then Shi Xiong found Li Lei and asked him to collect some glassware from the tribe. For this strange request, Li Lei didn't dare to refute it, so he readily agreed. So, early the next morning, Shi Xiong got 3 wine bottles, 2 glass vases, and a qualified thin iron pipe. With these things, Shi Xiong did not hesitate to prepare to fire the glass. The Hard Bones and Bunny Mouths following Ferguson www.wuxiaspa.com Kuima, Hongyun and the ladies of the tribe who followed the stone bear, seeing Master Guardian raise the hammer without hesitation, crack, the 3 wine bottles and 2 glass vases were smashed, and the corners of their distressed lips twitched. Glass is nothing to Shi Xiong. He knows the value of this thing is not high. It is also not a good thing for Ferguson. After all, in this era, the penetration rate of glass in Europe is also relatively high. But glassware is still extremely precious to the Indians of this age. Such a wine bottle can be worth a piece of bison leather. Seeing Master Guardian smash these precious glassware like trash, it is a strange thing if they don't feel sorry for it. Don't feel bad about these glasses. This thing is not worth money. Shi Xiong looked up at the tribesmen who were all faceted and smiled and explained, "This thing is actually sand plus some other worthless things. It is fired, and it is not too difficult. It is much worse than steel making. If you like it, when I finish the work at hand, I will teach you how to burn glass. When you burn a pot of glass, you will know this, the real value of the gadget." Talking, Shi Xiong picked up the last complete wine bottle. This is a wine bottle containing fruit wine. I don't know who drank the wine clean, but the bottle has been kept for a long time. Have you seen this bottle? We can exchange at least 100 such bottles for a single bison leather. So, this thing is really worthless, said. Shi Xiong raised the hammer in his hand and directly smashed the last bottle. Then Shi Xiong put down the hammer, picked up the small broom and swept all these glass ballasts into the crucible, and started to ignite and melt the glass. Chapter 121. Glass blowing. Strictly speaking, glass does not melt. This peculiar substance can only be softened at high temperatures to form a special state called glassy between liquid and solid. To make glass reach the glassy state, a certain temperature is required. However, this temperature is not fixed. It depends on the minerals contained in the glass. Is like the lead glass of later generations, it only needs a temperature of 500 degrees to start softening, while the softening temperature of pure quartz glass is as high as 1600 degrees. However, most of the glass made by Europeans in this era is ordinary glass, so Ishikama estimates that it can be softened at a temperature of about 600 or 700 degrees. After all, the temperature of the alcohol lamp used in the laboratory of later generations is only about 1000 degrees, but the alcohol lamp can soften most of the glass. Ishikama does not have an alcohol lamp, let alone a higher temperature gas burner. He can only use a crucible to soften all the broken glass, and then use an iron pipe dipped in the liquid glass to blow what he needs. These glasses will soften in a while, and then I will use this iron pipe to blow some glassware that I need. Quick horse, I need you to help me. Taking advantage of the warming time, Shi Xiong began to call the name. Kuei-ma nodded affirmatively. After a while, when I start to blow glassware, you need to hold the heated tongs to hold the bottom of the glassware. Then the glass will adhere to the tongs to a certain extent. At this time, you need to hold the glassware slowly and uniformly. Pull down from the bottom. Not too fast, but not too slow. It's about this speed, Shi Xiong said, holding the tongs in his hand and making a downward motion. Do you understand? Kuei-ma nodded again. He took the tongs, made a gesture of lifting, and then pulled it down slowly and evenly as if holding something. Although it is the first time to do this kind of action, Kuei-ma does it very well, and there is almost nothing to be faulty about. Shi Xiong is very satisfied. You should practice this action more now. Don't really get out of the glass in a while. You panic again, Shi Xiong faintly commanded. Kuei-ma executed this command without hesitation, and started practicing with a pair of tongs. Shi Xiong picked up a pair of tongs and a pair of iron scissors and handed them to Hardbone. In a moment you hold this pair of scissors to prepare. When I say to cut, you must cut the glass I pulled out without stopping. You only need to cut the upper end of the bottle I blow out, but you need to hold the glass tube with tongs before cutting, otherwise the glass tube will break when it falls on the ground. Seeing Hardbones, he didn't understand. Shi Xiong explained to him again while making gestures. After Hardbones had completely figured out what he needed to do, Shi Xiong sent him to practice like a fast horse. Finally, you must remember that the temperature of this softened glass is very high. You must never directly touch the glass with any part of your body, otherwise it will burn you a certain part of your body. If it's too heavy, it will burn you to death. Shi Xiong's remarks are not alarmist. Once the glass starts to soften, it means that the temperature at this time is at least 600 degrees above. This kind of temperature is not something that a human body can handle. Because there is a layer of crucible, the glass heating speed is much slower than the direct heating speed with an alcohol lamp. But it was too slow. The broken glass still started to soften as the temperature in the crucible continued to rise. When the broken glass became soft and began to become a pool of glass, Shi Xiong knew the time had come. Everything is ready. I'm going to start blowing glass. Don't panic, just keep your mind at ease. Shi Xiong said. He took the 1-meter-long thin iron pipe, dipped one end into the softened glass, and then took a deep breath and held the other end of the iron pipe in his mouth, and it started to continue and stabilize. Of blowing. Blowing glass is not as easy as imagined, and this kind of work is still very dangerous. Whether it is ancient or modern, glass blowing has always been done only by experienced people, or when blowing glass, an experienced person must be around to guide you. Blowing glass requires strength, because glass in the glass state is not as simple as blowing bubbles with soapy water. It requires a strong lung capacity. Moreover, when blowing glass, you must maintain sufficient pressure in your mouth. Once you feel exhausted, your mouth should immediately leave the blowing tube. Otherwise, the inside of the glass that has just been blown will have a high possibility of causing the pressure inside the glass compressed by hot air. Those hot air with a temperature of several hundred degrees can only be sprayed along the blowpipe. If your mouth does not leave the blowpipe at this time, TSK, imagine the horror of several hundred degrees of hot air spraying into your mouth. Although Shi Xiong had not blown glass several times in his previous life, at that time, Mr. Wu told Shi Xiong a lot of glass blowing tips. As Shi Xiong blows his breath slowly and evenly into the blowpipe, several people are surprised to find that the glass that was originally stuck to the other end of the blowpipe has begun to bulge. www.wuxiaspad.com until it's not midwinter. When the shape of the small bottle was formed, Shi Xiong's other hand immediately made an action towards Kuema. Kuema immediately picked up the heating tongs to catch the small bottle, and then followed Shi Xiong to turn the direction of the blowpipe. Kuema dragged the tongs and began to pull the small bottle down slowly and evenly. As the small bottle continued to pull down, the bottle mouth was continuously stretched. Because Shi Xiong has been blowing air at this time, under the action of gravity and tension, a slender glass tube begins to take shape. When the length of the glass tube reached about 20 centimeters, Shi Xiong made another gesture at the hard bone, and the hard bone immediately picked up the big scissors and another pair of tongs that had been heated, and dragged the slender glass with the tongs, then used the scissors to cut 2 scissors at the mouth of the bottle and the end of the blowing key steadily. The small glass bottle was cut off and was held by the fast horse with tongs. The glass tube was also cut off by hard bones and held it with tongs. Shi Xiong took a sigh of relief and blown the glass at the mouth of the nozzle. Then he put down the blowpipe, looked at the glass tube and the small bottle, nodded in satisfaction and said, "Yes, yes, this time you did a very good job. Pretty. Let's continue to do this next." The praise of the guardian lord made the faces of several small attendants smile, and they were gearing up to wait for the second glass blowing. Lieutenant Ferguson looked at this scene enthusiastically. He knew that many glassware were blown out, but how to blow it was the first time he saw it with his own eyes. The glass has been heated in the crucible, so the next work of blowing the vials and glass tubes went smoothly. Not long after, there were 4 round vials about the same size as the vials and 4 glass pieces of more than 20 centimeters in length. Guan appeared in front of Shi Xiong. Chapter 122. Men don't drink and walk in the world in vain. The glass blowing process went smoothly. Although 2 small bottles and 1 glass tube were blown out in the middle, 4 qualified small bottles and 4 qualified thin glass tubes were finally obtained. With these 2 things, there is no problem in making a simple thermometer. Old wood was called over. Of course, he came with his woodworking tools and a small section of oak. It didn't take long for the old wood to create 4 small oak stoppers with a hole in the middle for the 4 small bottles. The size of the oak stopper is just enough to plug the mouth of the small glass bottle, and the hole in the middle is just right for the glass tube to pass through the middle. Moma grass has pigments extracted from plants that are used to dye cloth. The stone bear will come a little, then melt it in the water, and then pour the indigo blue water into 4 small bottles. After it is full, plug it tightly with an oak stopper, and finally insert the glass tube through the small hole of the oak stopper until it reaches the top of the vial. Next, use melted wax to seal all the gaps between the small hole and the glass tube. Because of the capillary phenomenon, the indigo water and the vial climbed a distance along the glass tube, making the height of the water and the glass tube a bit higher than the glass bottle. Finally, Shi Xiong dropped 2 drops of the squeezed peanut oil from the top of the glass tube. The role of these 2 drops of oil is very important. They can form an oil film on the upper layer of the water surface in the glass tube, which can prevent the water and the glass tube from evaporating. At this time, the recommended thermometer is almost done. You only need to mark out the various temperature values from the glass tube, and this simple thermometer is completely completed. It is not difficult to draw a more accurate temperature value on the glass tube. In later generations, even elementary school students knew the principle of thermal expansion and contraction, and the thermometer was made using the principle of liquid thermal expansion and contraction. North America has now entered the coldest long night moon. In the Cherokee era, this is December, but it should actually be between mid-12th and mid-January of the Gregorian calendar, a period of time. Because the Cherokee's air method is calculated based on the full moon, it is a bit similar to the Chinese lunar calendar, so there is a certain gap between it and the Gregorian calendar date. In the coldest long night moon, after night, even at the foot of the Great Smoky Mountains, the temperature will be below 0. Not to mention that there was a heavy snowfall just 2 days ago, and the snow does not turn cold, and now it is the coldest time. In order to make a simple thermometer, Shi Xiong took a tub of water and left it outside the house as early as last night. After 1 night passed, the water in the tub had already frozen. Poured out the ice in the wooden basin, smashed it into several large pieces, and mixed it with cold water and put it into the wooden basin. At the same time, the 4 small bottles with glass tubes inserted into the tub. Most of the small glass bottles were immersed in the ice-water mixture. After waiting for more than 10 minutes, the temperature of this basin of water reached 0 degrees. The temperature of the ice-water mixture is the best reference temperature of 0 degrees Celsius even in later generations. At this time, the indigo water column in the glass tube also stabilized at a height, and the temperature value represented by this height was 0 degrees Celsius. Made a mark from that position, and then Shi Xiong took out the 4 small bottles with glass tubes, and put them into the frying spoon with a flat wooden board underneath, and then added cold water. The height of the cold water is 1 piece lower than the mouth of the vial, and then the water is ignited and boiled. Because the glass bottle is heated with cold water, there is no need to worry about the small glass bottle exploding. The water in the scoop is not too much, so the water in it boils quickly. The reference temperature at this time is 100 degrees Celsius. Although the location of the Gaoshu tribe has a certain altitude, this will cause the water to boil at a temperature of less than 100 degrees Celsius. But this is not a high-altitude area after all, and the altitude of the tribe is definitely not more than 400 meters, so even if there is an error, it can be at most about 1 degree Celsius. This is not a precise thermometer. The error is within an acceptable range. The value of 100 degrees Celsius is marked out. As long as the distance from the value of 0 degrees Celsius to the value of 100 degrees Celsius is divided into 100, then each one represents 1 degree Celsius. In the next step, you only need to fix the small bottle with the glass tube on the wooden board, and then draw the corresponding temperature value on the wooden board. Then this simple thermometer is completely completed. This job is also done by Old Wood, and he is best at doing this kind of fine work. Finally, when the 4 simple thermometers were completed, they were hung on the 4 walls of the house by stone bears. As a result, the 4 thermometers were really accurate, and the temperature of almost every thermometer stayed at a value of 12 degrees Celsius. The temperature in this room is about 12 degrees Celsius, Shi Xiong said cheerfully. Under Shi Xiong's explanation, Kuema and the others have understood the approximate temperature of 0 and what temperature is 100 degrees. Ishikame's wooden house does not have good thermal insulation performance. Although there is a charcoal basin in the house, the temperature is around 10 degrees Celsius. Seeing that the 4 little things that Master Guardian spent so much effort to make can accurately judge the temperature level, even Lieutenant Ferguson was a little surprised. In this era, even in Europe, thermometers are relatively rare things, and there is no uniform standard for temperature. At this time, in Europe, There was a Fahrenheit thermometer invented by the Dutchman Wallenheit www.wuxiaspa.com. There were also a column thermometer invented by the Frenchman Lemuel, and a Celsius thermometer invented by the Swedish Celsius. Every country the temperature standards used are different. The 4 thermometers made by Shi Xiong are all Celsius thermometers. The previous Huaxia used the Celsius standard, so Shi Xiong will naturally make thermometers in accordance with the Celsius standard. Master Guardian, can we make wine with these 4 thermometers? The rabbit licked his hare lips and asked cautiously. Haha, why, even you little guy wants to drink too, Shi Xiong teased. Well, I drank some of the wine you gave me last time, it's delicious. Rabbit Mouth smiled. Bone kicked the rabbit's mouth, and said angrily, you are ashamed to say the last time you drank. The last time the Guardian gave us the wine, you got drunk after 2 sips, and you talked nonsense and drunk crazy. You fellow can't drink anymore. The rabbit mouth laughed, and although he didn't refute it, the expression on his face made it very clear. Don't let me drink? No way. Shi Xiong smiled and said, yes, with this thing, we can make koji. Once the koji is made, then you can start making wine, but it will take a month or 2. Rabbit Mouth, you just want to drink now, can't drink it? Rabbit Mouth asked in surprise. Master Guardian, you mean I can drink? Shi Xiong happily said, why not? As the saying goes, men don't drink, and they are in vain to walk in the world. Your kid is a little man anyhow, why can't you drink? Awesome. P.S. Bo to thank book friends 201907160104276669 inches 100 for the reward. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Music Making. The production process of sake koji is far more complicated than making wine. Ishikama intends to make whole wheat dakwu, because the amount of wheat in the tribe is not bad, and after dakwu is made, it can be made into ordinary low-alcohol liquor or high-quality liquor through distillation. When Shi Xiong made koji with his elders in his previous life at home, he made all-wheat dakwu at home. The koji made is like large bricks, so this kind of dakwu is also called koekwu. When making wine, you only need to break a piece of koji, then crush it into a powder, and then sprinkle it into the brewing ingredients at a ratio of 1:0.007 and stir evenly. The remaining work is to let the brewing ingredients ferment by themselves. Although there is still a lot of wheat left in the tribe, Shi Xiong is not willing to use all of it to make koji. He just chose 12 bags of wheat, which weighs about 300 jin and is of relatively good quality. Before making koji, Shi Xiong and Kuaoma thoroughly cleaned the stone house used to make refractory bricks, and then prepared several charcoal basins in it, and then hung the thermometer on the wall. This temporarily useless stone house became a room for mixing, stepping and compiling. Then Shi Xiong started to make koji. The selected 300 kilograms of wheat were put into a large wooden bucket, first added 30 kilograms of water and mixed well, and then placed 3 of them in a stone house where the temperature was raised to about 20 degrees by igniting a charcoal basin. This process is called moistening. The water-soaked wheat starts to be ground, and the soaked wheat is ground into couscous flour with a stone mill, and then sent to the stone house and stirred with water in a certain proportion again. This time adding water and stirring is a very critical step. The amount of water must be appropriate. Too much or too little will not work. If the amount of water is too much, it is not easy to form the slab when stepping on the skewer, and it will be easily deformed when it enters the skewed room to cultivate the skewer. Moreover, the curved billet is easily pressed too tightly, which is not conducive to the growth of beneficial microorganisms inside the curved billet, and it will cause harmful bacteria such as mucor and Aspergillus niger to grow on the surface of the curved billet. In addition, if you add more water, the koji will heat up too quickly and it will be difficult to cool down. The time for the koji in the high temperature stage will be prolonged, which will easily cause the proliferation of rancid bacteria. resulting in increased loss of raw materials, and ultimately the quality of the finished koji. Reduce. Similarly, if the amount of water added is too small, the curd is not easy to adhere, resulting in excessive scattering, thereby increasing the number of broken curds. At the same time, when the koji is cultivated, it will cause the koji to lose water too quickly, which will result in the insufficient reproduction of beneficial microorganisms, which will also affect the quality of the finished koji. In short, the water content of the koji blank will directly affect the quality of the finished koji, so this time adding water and stirring is very critical. When Shi Xiong's family made wine koji, they had already figured out a ratio for adding water. When making this kind of whole wheat liqueur, the ratio of adding water and stirring is generally about 38% of the weight of the semolina, and the maximum should not exceed 40%. And because it's winter koji making, the water that was stirred with water this time was heated in advance. The water temperature during stirring is around 33 degrees. With a simple thermometer, the water temperature can be well controlled. It is said that about 6% of kumother should be added when stirring, but Shi Xiong does not have a year-old white kumother, so it cannot be added. But it doesn't matter. When the koji is fermented, 1 day or so more can also achieve the goal. This time the mixing is different from the moistening material. In addition to the ratio of adding water, it is necessary to mix well. Because if the mixing is not uniform, it will directly affect the uniformity of moisture and nutrients and air permeability, resulting in insufficient fermentation of the dough. Ishikama is very experienced. When he was making koji with the elders in the family, he did the hard work of mixing ingredients. Who made him a young man. Ishikama vigorously stirred these koji materials in the koji room with the charcoal pot lit. In the end, the koji materials were stirred into no lumps, and they were kneaded into without sticking to the hands. After the mixing is complete, these ingredients are quickly poured into wooden boxes one by one. These wooden boxes are the molds specially made by Shi Xiong. Let old wood create. The size of the curve mold is roughly 27 cm 17 cm 5 cm, and the weight of the piece that is stepped on with such a curve mold is about 5 kg. After pouring the song material into the wooden box, the fast horse, hard bones and momo grass, who had washed their feet a long time ago, began to play. They need to step on the music in the mold with their bare feet. First step on the center of the mold with your feet, and then step on both sides along the 4 sides. The curved material must be stepped tightly and smoothly. The requirement is that the middle is slightly loose and the 4 sides are tight. After stepping on one side, turn it over and step on the other side. This process is to step on the song. The requirements for stepping on the song are also very high. The person who steps on the song should not be too heavy, otherwise the song will be stepped too tightly. Similarly, the weight should not be too light, otherwise the curve will not be strong enough. No matter it is too tight or too loose, the koji will be fermented directly, which will affect the quality of the final koji. The stone bear in the previous life was also the main force of stepping songs. His weight at that time was exactly about 102. It was not heavy or light, and it was best for stepping songs. Now he can't step on the song. He's just stupid with the physique of his head. If he goes up to step on it, I am afraid that he will have to step on the song to fall apart. Fast horses and hard bones are good, and the tall and sturdy woman Momo cow weighs about the same, so after the 3 of them have stepped on the stone bear's inspection, they are immediately piled aside. www.wuxiasp.com. The process to be carried out after the completion is the composing. Piling song is to put the step song blanks into the song room and pile them up in an orderly manner. However, Shi Xiong and the others both stir the koji material and step on the koji in this stone house, which serves as the koji room, so they only need to put the stepped koji in the stone house. It is not just a house that can be used as a music room. The koji room must first have good heat preservation and strong moisturizing ability, so that the temperature and humidity in the room can always be kept in a balanced state when the koji is fermented. Secondly, the koji room also needs to be able to drain gout and moisture, so as to better control the temperature and humidity in the koji room during the fermentation process. At this time, A layer of dry thatch nearly 20 centimeters thick has been thrown on the ground where the music room is preparing to pile the music, which is used for heat preservation and ventilation. The stepped curved billets were placed on the thatch under the command of the stone bear, and the distance between each other was only about wide, and the middle distance was also separated by thatch. This is to promote the growth of mildew. When one layer is filled, a layer of about 7 or 8 centimeters of dry thatch is laid on the curved blocks. The second layer of curved billets are also staggered in the same manner as the first layer of curved billets. Arrange up to the 4th floor, and then change rows to continue the arrangement. This is pile music. 300 caddies of wheat can't produce many slabs. Shi Xiong took the rabbit mouth and Ferguson in the slab for a short time, and more than 60 slabs were piled up. Finally, a thick layer of dry thatch is covered on and around it, which has the effect of keeping warm and moisturizing. At the same time, it also prevents the condensed water droplets produced during the fermentation process from falling on the koji and causing rancidity. So far, the preparatory work of the entire music production is completely completed. Next, wait for the koji to ferment, and then turn the koji twice in the middle while controlling the temperature and humidity. Chapter 124, Project Manager. Take out all the charcoal basins. You can no longer keep this stuff in the music room. Close the music room for a while. If the charcoal bowl is still burning, we can make these pieces for nothing, Shi Xiong said as he held it up with both hands. A charcoal basin walked outside the house. Kuema and they also broke the remaining 4 charcoal basins. The area of this music room is not very large. Just now, 5 charcoal basins were burning in it, plus a few large living people were moving in it, and the temperature had already risen. Although it is not as hot as summer, it is definitely comparable to the heating room of the previous life. Shi Xiong was right. Before leaving the house, he glanced at the simple thermometer hung at the door. The temperature displayed on it was 22 degrees Celsius. Seeing that Shi Xiong had placed 3 thermometers in different positions of the kubai, then closed the door of the stone house, and put down the animal skin curtain hanging outside, Momocao asked curiously, "Guardian, this just do it?" Shi Xiong looked at the strong woman and shook his head slightly. "It's still early. It will take about 50 days at least for these wine tunes to be finished, but I don't need to be as busy as today." "Huh? It will take such a long time?" Momocao opened his mouth in surprise, as did the others. "Well, it takes such a long time, Momocao. You have to remember that making koji must not be irritable. This must be fully fermented, otherwise it will not be done well. If it is summer, the fermentation time can be shortened. It's 40 days. But it's winter and the weather is very cold, so the fermentation time will take at least 50 days. As for whether a qualified koji can be made during this time period, it needs to be judged according to the situation at that time. Momocao is the person in charge of Shi Xiong who will be responsible for making koji and making wine, just like Hong Yun's other good friend, Festica vulgaris. That lady is the person in charge who is selected by Shi Xiong for farming matters. Although the Gaoshu tribe can be regarded as a medium-sized tribe, there are still too few people who can use the stone bear. If he only counts on him to work on his own, he will never be able to develop the Gaoshu tribe to the planned scale. Therefore, from now on, Shi Xiong will start to train the person in charge of each project, just like the wood planer has been appointed as the person in charge of steel making, and Uncle Grey Moose has been appointed as the person in charge of salt making by him. These people were named project managers by Shi Xiong. When more and more projects appear in the future, Shi Xiong still needs to choose someone to be a project manager. There is an idiom in China that says it well, with a little bit to give it a face. Now Shi Xiong is a point. Even if he is an extremely powerful point, the scope of influence is not much larger, so he needs to cultivate more points. One point may be able to affect 100 people, so first train these 100 people into the second batch of points. Once these people are successful, then throw them out, and these 100 points can affect 10,000 people. If you develop further, more people will be affected. The principle of geometric multiplication, Shi Xiong, is still very clear. Do I need to pay attention to anything during the fermentation of the slabs? After the initial surprise, Momocao began to take himself to the position of project manager and asked Shi Xiong on his own initiative. Shi Xiong nodded in satisfaction, knowing that Momocao had already decided to do it seriously. For this kind of people who like to ask questions, Shi Xiong has never hesitated to answer. Of course, there are still many things that need to be paid attention to during the fermentation of the koji. In fact, although the work we have done before is very important, the real key lies in the period of fermentation of the koji. Shi Xiong pointed to the stone house and said, "We have two doors in this room, one facing east and the other west." This was originally designed to be able to install the refractory bricks faster and move out the refractory bricks faster after the refractory bricks are burned. Two doors specially flowed out. If the two doors are opened at the same time, the convective cold air will reduce the temperature and humidity in the koji room in a short time. However, the fermentation of koji requires stable temperature and humidity. So you have to remember that these two doors must not be opened at the same time. After a pause, Shi Xiong continued to ask, "Will you look at the simple thermometer?" Momocao nodded. She would learn something so simple as soon as she learned it. Especially the Master Guardian also showed two signs on the simple thermometer. As long as you are not a fool, you can understand what those two signs are for. You have to remember that these koji we made are strictly high-temperature koji, so the best temperature for koji fermentation is between 58 degrees Celsius and 63 degrees Celsius. The two red marks I marked, the one above it represents a temperature of 63 degrees Celsius, and the lower one represents a temperature of 58 degrees Celsius. If the temperature is in the middle of these two marks, then it is safe. If the temperature exceeds the upper mark, it needs to be turned. If the temperature is low for the mark below, then you need to continue to keep warm and moisturize. Well, starting from today, after about 7 days, you can enter the music room to take a look at the thermometers I put on the music billet. At this time, the temperature and humidity in the music room will be very high. www.wuxiaspa.com because after 7 days of fermentation, the fermentation at this time has entered the peak period, so you need to pay close attention to the temperature and humidity in the koji room. You must be fast when entering and leaving the music room, and you can only enter and exit through this door. Before entering, close the animal skin curtain and then open the door inside. When you come out, close the door first and then open the animal skin curtain. This can ensure that the temperature and humidity in the music room are not greatly lost. Of course, if you find that the temperature of the three thermometers exceeds the top red mark, then you need to perform the first reversion. The so-called reversal means that when the temperature of the koji product reaches the requirements of medium and high temperature koji, the positions of the upper and lower layers and the inner and outer rows of the koji are reversed, and the vertical position of the koji itself must be reversed. In other words, it's a big turnaround for all the slabs. Turning is also a very critical work procedure, especially for the first turn. The timing of the turn is directly related to the quality of the finished song. It is precisely for this reason that Shi Xiong said so solemnly to Momocao. After the first rewind, the temperature and humidity will drop a lot, but it doesn't matter. This is a phenomenon that will inevitably occur. However, within 2 or 3 days after the first rewind, the temperature and humidity in the room will go back to the original level, and after about 7 days, we still need to make a second turn. Shi Xiong took the trouble to tell Momocao a lot. Even though the stone bear would follow along when the song was turned, he still needed Momocao to remember all these things, because in the future these jobs will need Momocao to lead them. P.S. Bo to thank book friends 201907160104276669 inches 100 for the reward. Chapter 125, Turnover. It is not nonsense to say that making koji is more complicated and difficult than making wine. The brewing process is not as complicated as koji making, and the requirements for conditions are so high. As long as any one of the links is not done in place, the final produced koji may be a pool of sour and unbearable substances. Shi Xiong clearly remembers that in the process of making wine song in his previous life, the little boy of the uncle's family, that is, the 3-year-old cousin of Shi Xiong, turned his high fever into pneumonia, and frightened the family. A family of children stayed in the hospital for 2 days, but in the end the child was out of danger, but the whole half of the house was blinded. Because the second day when my cousin became ill, it happened to be the first time that the song was turned over. At that time, the whole family was taking care of the little guy in the hospital, who could take care of that half of the house, so it was delayed for 2 days, causing the temperature in the music room to rise to more than 70 degrees. Anyway, that half of the house was finally used as fertilizer on the ground. The sour smell, even if it is mixed into the feed and fed to the pigs will dislike it. Although his previous hometown was not rich, it was 100 times stronger than the current Gaoshu tribe. So that half of the house's wine music made my grandfather and father and uncle distressed for a few days, so I started to make wine music again. Gaoshu tribe cannot tolerate failure. At least before next year's winter wheat harvest, Shi Xiong will not be able to find the raw materials for making koji. Although there is still some wheat in the tribe, it is the food of the tribe. So, even if the matter is handed over to the wine project manager Momokao, Shi Xiong is still very concerned about this half of the house. At noon on the 7th day when the koji was fermented in the koji room, the sky was gloomy, and the sun was completely blocked by lead gray dark clouds. A heavy snowfall is likely to come again. The north wind was blowing, and Shi Xiong knew that when the wind stopped, it was time for snow. Momokao followed the stone bear to the door of the Kwang, followed by Kuai-ma and the others. Hong Yun and Li Lei also followed. After all, the success of this half of the house, but it represents the key to whether the tribe can make wine by themselves in the future. You wait outside, don't go in yet, Shi Xiong said to the person behind him, and then Momokao took off the animal skin clothes outside and put on a set of clean cotton clothes. In order to keep warm, the tribesmen in the tribe wear heavy animal skin clothes in winter. Clothes made of this kind of animal skins do keep warm, but this kind of clothes is also very sour and refreshing. Animal skin clothes cannot be cleaned at any time like cotton clothes, and in the cold weather, no people in the tribe are willing to take off the animal skin clothes and wash them, so the bacteria contained in this kind of animal skin clothes can be imagined. The music room is another place that needs to be cleaned, so it is necessary to change clothes before entering the music room. Opened the animal skin curtain, Shi Xiong and Momokao got in, then turned around to seal the curtain, and then opened the wooden door of the music room. A hot flash rushed toward his face, which formed a sharp contrast with the cold outside. Why is it so hot here? After a while, sweat beads appeared on Momokao's forehead. Yes, it's so hot here. Shi Xiong glanced at Momokao, and pointed to the simple thermometer hanging at the door. Although the glass tube of this simple thermometer is not sealed, because the peanut oil is dripped inside, the liquid surface is sealed, so the liquid inside hardly evaporates. This simple thermometer still shows the temperature of the music room very steadily. 42 degrees Celsius. This is only room temperature. If it is in this lab, the temperature at this time is at least 20 degrees higher than the room temperature. Sure enough, the two people looked at the three simple thermometers on the billet again, and the three thermometers gave almost the same number, 63 degrees Celsius. Is this temperature going to be overturned? Momokao asked. Yes, it needs to be turned, Shi Xiong nodded. The insulation and moisturizing effect of this music room is really good, and it is not in vain to build this house with big rocks and mud. You know it's winter now, and if you change the music room, the time of the first rendition may have to be delayed by 1 or 2 days. Then I call them in? Momokao asked with some excitement. Well, but remember to let them change clothes. Momokao nodded and left the house. After a while, Kuai-ma, who had changed their clothes, followed in. Although Hong Yun and Li Lei are the chief priest of Kabul and the leader of the tribe, they can only wait outside the house because they don't bring clothes. They didn't dare to touch the guardian's mold. They knew very well that if they just went in like this, the only fate would be to be thrown out unceremoniously by the guardian. That guy can do such a thing. There are so many people and strength, and this small half-house is quickly turned over, and then it is wrapped in hay and continues to ferment. And obviously, after this first turn, The temperature in the room immediately dropped a lot. However, the humidity is still very high, and a group of people are all sweaty. Went out and quickly put on animal skin clothes. Turning over in this kind of weather is actually a very tossing job. The temperature difference between the inside and outside of the house is more than 30 degrees, and I sweat a lot while working inside, and I will catch a cold if I don't pay attention to it. Did not dare to stand outside and explain so much to Hong Yun and Li Lei. A group of people hurriedly returned to their wooden houses. Before coming, Shi Xiong had let each of them boil hot water. After returning to the wooden house, drinking a large bowl of soup and taking a hot bath would be a good way to get rid of the cold. After Shi Xiong finished the bath, Li Lei walked in with Hong Yun. "Dolly Xiong, how's this wine song made?" Hong Yun was suffocated and couldn't wait to ask as soon as he entered the door. "Not bad, at least so far. The fermentation of the koji has been very successful," Shi Xiong said while wiping his wet hair. "If nothing happens, wait 7 days for the second turn, then wait for a while. After time, this distiller's yeast is even completely successful, so we can make our own wine." Li Lei subconsciously licked his lips and asked. The wine traded from the vase just made him obsessed with it, and it was so delicious. Shi Xiong smiled and shook his head and said, "If you want to make the brewed wine taste better, it's best to wait 3 months, because although the koji has been successfully produced, it needs to be stored for a period of time before using it. The wine brewed like that tastes better." Oh, Li Lei, who was full of joy, was hit hard by these words. He still wanted to drink the wine he brewed as soon as possible. It seems that if he wants to drink the wine he brewed, he still has to wait for nearly half a year. However, if you can't wait for Li Lei, the koji made just now can actually be used. It is the taste of the brewed wine. Before Shi Xiong's words were finished, a stern sound of Ruaruo's horn suddenly came from a distance. Li Lei's face changed suddenly because of Shi Xiong's words, and his eyebrows also changed. Fuck tightly. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.